And then there are a couple of smaller chapters that we have to do, chapters which are not directly mentioned in your syllabus, but nevertheless they are chapters from where questions keep coming, both in your prelims as well as in your mains examination. So we'll, after artificial intelligence, we'll move on to the chapters related to defense, related to health, and related to vaccines. It depends on what time we have and what chapters we can complete, but these are very, very small chapters. So we'll start with artificial intelligence. So we had begun with a basic understanding of what artificial intelligence is, what goes behind the scenes in artificial intelligence, what are the concepts on which artificial intelligence is based upon. So all these are the things that we had discussed. Now today we start with the different types of artificial intelligence. How do we classify what? Just give me one moment. Yeah. So I was saying that today we'll be discussing about the various different types of artificial intelligence, how exactly artificial intelligence can be classified. So first way to classify artificial intelligence is based on weak artificial intelligence versus strong artificial intelligence. Now, when we say weak artificial and strong artificial intelligence, understand the basic difference between the two. When we say weak, we are basically talking about stimulated thinking. All right, we are talking about simulated thinking. Now, simulated thinking means that the artificial intelligence, although it can take decisions on its own, it has the cognitive abilities and it can understand the pattern and do something based on that pattern. But at the same time, whatever this artificial intelligence is doing, it is doing based on what we have trained them to do. Correct. So, for example, if you have trained an artificial intelligence based system to do calculations, it can only do calculations. If you have asked it to do some kind of image processing, it can only do image processing. So it does not have its own thinking ability. Correct. It cannot take decisions on its own. It can only take decisions on which it has been trained to do something. Correct. The decisions that it has been trained to make, only those kind of decisions it can make. Right. So that's why this is called as weak artificial intelligence. On the other hand, when we talk about strong artificial intelligence is where we are talking about some kind of actual thinking, where the artificial intelligence based systems will be able to take decisions on their own. They'll be able to think something on their own. Even if you have asked it to not do something, even then it thinks that it should do it, it will do it. So if, let's say, it reaches that stage where it can do anything, it will start doing anything according to its own wishes, then in that case it becomes strong artificial intelligence. Right now, whatever we have in the entire world, whatever artificial intelligence based systems we have, everything is weak artificial intelligence. We do not have a working example of strong artificial intelligence yet. Many believe that strong artificial intelligence may never become possible, but again, in science, never say never. So, but at least for now, we know that whatever systems we have, whatever artificial intelligence we have, it's all weak artificial intelligence. Another way to classify is based on narrow versus general artificial intelligence. When we say something is narrow artificial intelligence, narrow means that it could do only one kind of work, or it could do a couple of kinds of works and nothing beyond that. All right. So, for example, let's say we took image processing as an example. So, an AI that has been based on, or which has been trained to do image processing, cannot do language processing. All right. Cannot do anything else. It can only do image processing. Similarly, when you have asked it to do some kind of work, or let's say trained it to do some kind of work, it can only do that work, and it is not able to do multiple different types of things. So that's why when it is limited to a single task or a set number of tasks, in that case we say that this is narrow artificial intelligence. Whereas in case of general artificial intelligence, we are saying that there is a wide range of tasks that can be completed by the AI-based system. So when that happens, in this case, you'll say that it is general artificial intelligence. Again, when it comes to the classifications like this, today you'll see that artificial intelligence that we are using is narrow artificial intelligence. We still haven't reached a place where we can say that general artificial intelligence is actually being used in a real world. So that's why we see that right now whatever we have is weak artificial intelligence and narrow artificial intelligence. Right now we do not have artificial intelligence-based systems which are strong and general. Now, after this, we see that there is a new type of artificial intelligence that has all of a sudden taken over the world over the last couple of years, and this is generative artificial intelligence. Now, until now, the difference where exactly generative artificial intelligence is different as compared to the normal different types of artificial intelligence that we have been using. Generative artificial intelligence is where artificial intelligence can create content for you. It can create content for you. So until now, artificial intelligence has more been about recognition of patterns, understanding of those patterns, giving you results based on the analytics of those patterns, predicting something based on whatever input it has been given. It would be able to analyze the data, read the data, perceive the data, and maybe comprehend it and act upon that data. So, but it could not create something for you. It would not be able to create a video for you, create a music for you, create a text for you. It couldn't do that yet. But with generative AI, we see that also changes. That now we see that artificial intelligence will be able to design. It has been designed to create new content such as images, videos, text, or music that is similar or indistinguishable from the content created by humans. So that's why whatever content it creates now, it is something that a human would create. It is similar to something that a human would create, and it is almost unrecognizable that the content was not created by the human, but rather it was created by an AI-based system. So that is where we see that generative AI again all of a sudden has changed the world. And there are certain examples of generative AI. The first such example is this. The first such example is DALL-E. It is DALL-E. Now, DALL-E basically is a kind of software or kind of an AI that can generate images for you based on the instructions that you have given. So, do you recognize or almost recognize what this picture is? Yes, it is. It is Mona Lisa with a twist. Correct. Right. So Mona Lisa, where let's say if I give the instruction to a DALL-E software or DALL-E AI that you produce a picture of Mona Lisa for me, where Mona Lisa should have a mohawk. So this is where you see that you have Mona Lisa with a mohawk. It's not your regular Mona Lisa, correct? So this is something that DALL-E can do. You give it instructions, you describe something for it, and based on your description, it will be able to generate a picture for you. So for example, let's say you say that okay, generate a picture for me where I am sitting on the beach side with waves coming from the sea, and there is little small shower also happening by the side of the sea and all that, whatever you want. Or picture me as sitting in a cottage in middle of a jungle and all these kind of things. So whatever you describe, it will be able to generate a picture for you accordingly. And now what happens is that this is something where the things start to change, because until now artificial intelligence has been more about just generation of not generation but recognition of patterns, understanding of the data, analyzing that data, and give you certain results based on that data. So but now it changes that it is able to create content for itself. Another very important example, I'm sure you've heard of it, ChatGPT. You know what ChatGPT is? Anyone who's tried ChatGPT or anyone who's not tried ChatGPT even today? So you have, correct? Many of you have. So Yeah, it is quite it is weak in math, otherwise quite good. I agree with you. But for that also we have something. I'll tell you. ChatGPT failed UPSC exam. I'll tell you why it failed. It wouldn't fail in the future. It failed. Now we shouldn't be happy about it that it failed. I can guarantee you that it will not fail in the future. Right. So ChatGPT, for those of you who don't know, ChatGPT basically is an AI-based system, a kind of a generative AI, where you ask it any question, and based on the question that you've asked, it will be able to give you a solution. It will be able to give you an answer, and that answer that it will generate for you will be an original answer. How normal search engines work, for example, if you go to Google and type something on the Google search bar, how it works is that whatever you type, it will give you a lot of links, a lot of website links, where you can go and you can read about those topics. But in this case, whatever questions you ask, an exact answer for it will be given to you. An exact answer based on that will be given to you. So, for example, let's say what you see on the screen, that if I just ask it to give me a script for a 10-minute lecture on artificial intelligence, it is able to generate that. If you see this, good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to talk about one of the most fascinating and rapidly growing fields in computer science, that is artificial intelligence, and so on. It starts. So, if I want, I mean, for whatever lecture I'm taking, if I want, I can give it a prompt that okay, fine, this is what I need. This is what I need to do in the classroom. Please give me a script for it. It will be able to generate a script for me. Now, I'm not saying that whatever I'm teaching the classroom is based on whatever scripts have been given to me from here, but I'm saying that it is possible. Right now, it is not at a level that I'll be able to use them, but slowly and steadily, it will also grow and it will become much better version of what it is, and we'll see that it will be able to give me whatever I need according to the requirements. So today we know that there are mistakes that happen here. We know that you cannot completely rely on the authenticity of the data being provided here, because ultimately you have to understand that how is it generating the data. It is generating the data based on lakhs of websites for which it has been trained, lakhs and lakhs of various different topics and all these articles and all these things that exist online. It has been trained on it. So that's why it can, whenever you give any instruction, or let's say when you ask any question, it will look for those keywords in the entire database that it has, and it will be able to generate a content based on all those things. Now it all depends on where exactly is it taking the data from. So for example, you do not know the authenticity of the data. For example, let's say if I know that it will give me a wrong answer, then only I can use it so that I can verify what's correct and what is wrong. Many times when I give it an instruction, I don't get right answers all the time. So for example, I think Chaitanya, it was you that you mentioned that mathematics is weak. I agree. So for example, it was just 2 weeks back. Somebody gave me a question on probability to be solved, which was supposed to be solved with the help of Bayes theorem. For those of you know, so now I applied Bayes theorem. I solved that question. I got the answer as 63% being the probability. I fed the same to ChatGPT just to check whether I'm getting the right answer. It showed me a completely off answer. The answer that ChatGPT gave me was 15%, which was absolutely wrong. I knew that this was wrong. I then gave it another instruction that look, I think that the answer that you've given me is wrong. So can you please recalculate this for me and give me the answer again? It did a recalculation, and with recalculation, it gave me an answer of 63%. So now these things can happen. Now, if let's say I was somebody who did not know what probability is and how Bayes theorem works, and then I would have fed it on the system, whatever answer, whatever solution I would have received there, I would simply have copied and pasted it, because I don't know what's correct, what's wrong. So that is where the problem lies right now with the use of these kind of systems, that you cannot use them blindly. Right now, it's not at a stage where you'll be able to use it blindly, because you do not know about the data, whether the data will be authentic or not, or whether whatever sources it has gathered that data from, whether those are the best sources that you should have gone to. So, for example, when you go to a search engine, you get tens or let's say hundreds of results that you get, and you choose according to what you need. Accordingly, you'll go to that particular data and website, and you'll be able to get the required instruction from there, required data from there. But that's not happening here. But they also are trying to change that as well, where we see that there are 2 versions now that are available. There is version 3.5 and there is version 4. Right now, with version 4, there are some additional aspects that now have been included in ChatGPT. Although this is a paid version, so not everybody has the access to it. But in this version, for example, what they have given is certain other AI-based tools that can be used along with it. So, for example, let's say when it comes to current affairs, today, if you know, ChatGPT is not trained with current affairs, and that's why anything that comes after 2021, it will not be able to solve that, or it will not be able to give you the data for that. One of the reasons why when somebody gave it prelims 2022 question paper, it was not able to pass in that, and people became happy that oh, we are writing such a difficult examination that even ChatGPT would not solve it. You give it a 2019 question paper or 2018 question paper, chances are higher that it will score much better as compared to what it did with 2022 paper, right? Because it has not been trained for any information beyond September 2021. But with ChatGPT version 4, you have certain additional tools that can be used for current affairs. So, for example, today I can ask ChatGPT with the help of certain tools, where I can ask, for example, there is Scholar AI that can be used along with ChatGPT. So, if I ask ChatGPT along with Scholar AI that I need the top 10 articles on Chandrayaan 3 that have been published in the month of August, it will be able to give me those 10 articles. Then I can pick one of those articles and I can ask ChatGPT to summarize it for me. So, I can say that okay, article number 3 seems interesting. Please summarize article number 3 for me. It will be able to summarize that article number 3 for me. So, this is how I can use information better. That instead of, let's say, I going on a search engine, going through hundreds of articles, reading each and every article completely, then making notes out of it, then starting to understand how to exactly fetch the information that is required for me to deliver a lecture in the classroom. That would have been a long process. But now what happens is that if I know how to use ChatGPT well, I'll be able to shorten that process and make it pretty quick. That, for example, I'll go to the same, I'll ask for the top 10 most read articles on Chandrayaan 3. It will give me the list. I'll say that, okay, fine, this is the information that I need. Please summarize this information for me. It will summarize it and done. So how much time would take? Took perhaps maybe 2 to 4 minutes to 5 minutes maybe. That's it. So something that I would have taken hours to collate, I would be able to do it in 5 minutes. So that is where ChatGPT is going to, or let's say any kind of generative AI is going to change the things up. So for example, another something is where you can generate diagrams. With the help of DALL-E, you can generate diagrams. So if I need a diagram through which I want to explain something, a concept to you, I can do that very easily. Otherwise, I would be looking for an artist and I would ask them to make something like this. I cannot use maybe there are copyrighted materials that I cannot use directly. So I'll ask somebody to recreate something. Maybe they'll take a couple of days to recreate that, and then I'll get it, and then I can use it. Here, what I can do is I can simply go to a DALL-E kind of an AI, and I can simply describe what I need, and they'll generate the diagram for me, which will be an original diagram, and I can use it in the classroom if I want to. So this is how fast the things become. There was one tweet by one of the software engineers where the person described that there was a program that was supposed to be written for a certain software, and for that he wanted somebody to work on a freelance basis. So he asked around and that if somebody could do or make that software program for him. Then there was some person who agreed for it, and that person asked for 2 weeks of time, and that person I think asked for $100 if I'm not wrong. Person asked for $100 and 2 weeks of time. Then the same person says that okay, I kind of agreed with that person, but also I went to ChatGPT just to check whether I can get that code. I went to ChatGPT, asked for a certain code based on whatever my requirements were. That code was generated. That person ran that code, found that almost everything was fine. Whatever small tweaks were required, that person was able to make that tweak himself, and the code was ready within the next 1 hour. It took 2 minutes for ChatGPT to get that code running, and let's say another 58 minutes for that person to make those modifications according to his requirement. So something that would have caused something that would have taken 2 weeks of time plus $100 for him took 1 hour of time and $0 for him. So that is how the things can change, and that is where it comes to the negative side of aspects as well. That how things can become very dangerous. How things can become very dangerous, and also a lot of job losses that we already see in the tech sector can even get heightened. We'll see that a lot more problems will start to happen here. We already see that there are a lot of people who are losing out on their jobs. They are losing on the jobs because something that they would have done, ChatGPT is able to do that much faster. And that is where we see that there are a lot of issues with regards to the negative aspects of artificial intelligence, more about which we'll talk later. But this also brings us to superintelligence. Now, superintelligence is where we are talking about a combination of general and strong artificial intelligence. When both of these are acting simultaneously, and with this, what we see is that there will be a, let's say, if there is a point when artificial intelligence is able to surpass human intelligence, then in that case, it will be called as superintelligence. Because if, let's say, strong artificial intelligence and general artificial intelligence combines, what happens next is that you have general artificial intelligence, meaning that this AI system can do a lot of things together. Right? It has a capability to do a lot of things together, and it is strong AI, meaning that it can take its own decision. Even if you have asked it to not do that thing, even if you have asked it to do something else, it will do whatever it needs. So if it, let's say, comes down to it thinking about its own survival, and it knows that humans are the only ones who can not let us survive, or who can become superior to us, we first need to kill the humans, or we first need to destroy humanity. And that is where we can actually go to the next stage where AI system can become so dangerous. Something that the movies always keep showing us, something like that can actually become a reality if something like this happens, if at all. Although scientists believe that strong artificial intelligence and general artificial intelligence may never combine, and super intelligence may never become a reality. But again, you don't know. But there will be a simple solution to it, as many say that whenever that happens, switch off the power, switch off the AI based power wherever you are using it. So as long as you're not providing power, it will not be able to work. But we don't know, right? We don't know how far it can go, because whatever we are doing right now, we still believe that we are just scratching the surface and we have done nothing yet. What we are doing is very trivial with regards to AI compared to what we are actually capable of, or what AI is actually capable of. Now, looking at the applications today, applications run in various different directions. There are only, these are just some of the examples where artificial intelligence can be very, very useful, or rather has started being useful already. But again, when it comes to the possibility of growth, the possibility of what it can actually do, it goes much beyond what we are discussing here. So for example, let's say in the finance sector. In the finance sector, it's about the modeling, the budgeting, understanding of the past, present, and the future of a certain market, and how accordingly a company should act according to that market, or even the government budgeting, how exactly it should happen according to the requirements of the day and the coming future. Then the legal sector. In the legal sector also, it's very, very useful, where it's more about reading of the documents, comprehending of those documents, and understanding of that document. So for example, let's say if there is a contract, that is running between two parties, the contract basically can be read with the help of AI, and AI can very quickly mark certain areas that are must reads for any given firm. So then that firm will be able to read those contracts much quicker, and the chances of missing out on something will be lesser, because they will be reading it, plus they'll also make the AI system also read it, and in that sense, the chances of missing out on a certain key point will be minimal. Similarly, in the manufacturing sector. So in the manufacturing sector, we know that AI can lead to automation of the industries. It can lead to automation of the industries. It can lead to increase in the productivity of any given sector. At the same time, it can also be used in energy optimization. It can be used in energy optimization, or also resource optimization. It can be used in various different fields, and it can actually be useful in all these aspects as well. For example, how much energy consumption happens in a given certain area according to what are the peak hours, what are the non-peak hours. So how electricity should be maintained in a given industry. All those things can also be done with the help of AI. We are already doing that with the help of AI. Then making intelligent robots. So in robots, we know that robots have sensors, and robots are actually going to work on the basis of the inputs being provided. So in that sense, also AI-based robots can also be generated, where a robot is working on AI, and manual intervention is not required every second to make that robot work on a certain workpiece. Then in the gaming sector also, we have seen that gaming is basically about understanding of the consumers, that what consumers need, and accordingly how exactly the gaming systems should be designed so that they can interact better with the consumers. They can also make the consumers addict to their platform, and for that purpose also they will be using AI. Then in ensuring cybersecurity as well, that in case of cybersecurity, what we see is the various aspects of malwares, various virus attacks, Trojan attacks, etc., that can happen in a given system. All those things can be well understood in advance, and they can be well planned with the help of AI. AI can think of all the potentials, and it can figure out what are the potential areas. It can basically show you those potentials, and so that you can act upon it based on the inputs provided. Then smart city infrastructure. Here we see that the governments can also use it to make better resource optimization at a city level as well, at a district level as well. At the same time, the infrastructure can also be managed better, so that all these energy resources can also be used better. Even traffic management can be done better with the help of AI. In Delhi, for example, you might know that it was announced last year that Delhi will start employing AI in the traffic lights, or however the traffic movements are happening, so that they can increase or they can basically make the traffic movements better, and hence decrease the total travel time of a person. So that's again something that is already being tried. Then medicine. So in case of medicine, again there are multiple different things. For example, today we see that it is very, very useful in drug or vaccine development. One of the one of the reasons why COVID-19 vaccines have been available very quickly has been artificial intelligence. Because with the help of AI-based systems, we have been able to find out all the past, present, and the future possibility of mutations in the virus, and accordingly, what exactly we need to design, what we need to attack, and how we can do that. All these things also have been done with the help of AI. So AI already has been used there. It can also be used in the diagnosis of a disease, to read the reports, to understand the reports. For example, let's say you are getting a bunch of tests done, then what exactly the combination of all those test results mean, all those things can also be found with the help of artificial intelligence. So there are multiple different things that artificial intelligence can do. Even let's say when it comes to running the equipments in something like an intensive care unit, where there are multiple such equipments that are running together to maintain the vitals of the patient, all those areas also we see that AI is working. It can very easily understand and comprehend the data and keep sending the data to the doctor or the healthcare facility. Then in the agriculture sector also, forecasting of weather is where it is being helpful. What exactly should be the strategy for this given season? What kind of crops can be grown? What kind of crops should be avoided? What is the prediction of the coming 3-4 months? Then the analysis of the soil also can be done with the help of AI-based systems. So we see that there are multiple different things. Then in case of business also, for the businesses to understand what their business model is, how exactly they can grow, what is the future of the market, what is the growth rate in the market, each and everything they can find out with the help of AI. And already we see that companies have been doing this in the past few years. And then in the education sector also. In the education sector, it will simply be about understanding of the student, understanding of the behavior and the pattern of the student, where the student is going right, where they are going wrong, what can be done for their improvement. All these other things that also can be designed with the help of AI. Something that we are already doing here at Byju's. We have been trying for the past couple of years to make these systems better than what they are. But we see that in all these cases, this is something that is going to be possible, not in the distant future, but in probably in a very near future. So two important areas where we see that AI will be very, very useful is one is healthcare and one is agriculture. So for example, in case of healthcare, it can be about drug development, the diagnosis of disease, or either the reduction of dosage, cancer research. So there are so many things, as you can see here. There are so many aspects where we see that AI can be very, very helpful in the field of healthcare. At the same time, in the case of agriculture as well, we see that there are multiple aspects of agriculture where AI-based systems have already become very, very useful. And in the coming years, we'll see that they will become more relevant in the field of agriculture as well. So that's why these are two important areas where we see that a lot of effort is being made, because these are areas which are larger than an individual. These are areas where the economy is basically dependent on this area, or a person's well-being is dependent on these kind of areas. So that is why we see that these are areas where more effort is being made with the help of artificial intelligence. Look at this question. This question was asked in 2019 paper. Please read the question. I'm not launching the poll for this question for a reason I'll tell you. Have you all read the question? Okay. So let me discuss this with you now. With the present state of development, artificial intelligence can effectively do which of the following? First is bring down electricity consumption in industrial units. Can this be done? This of course can be done. This 100% can be done, and this is what we were talking about, optimization of energy. So optimization of energy is something that is very, very much possible with the help of present state of development of AI. Then second is create meaningful short stories and songs. Can it create meaningful short stories and songs? The answer for me today is yes, it can. That is what your generative AI is all about. Correct. Generative AI is all about this only, that it can create songs. I mean, you tell me a topic on which you want a poem, you go to ChatGPT, you create a poem on that. So you'll be able to create a poem on any topic that you want. We tested it almost a year back when I met one of my friends from college, and almost after 10 years of college probably. And that is where we started testing ChatGPT, and he simply asked a question of ChatGPT that please write a poem on two friends meeting almost after 10 years who used to be very close friends in the college. And we really got a 5-stanza poem, not even a small poem like that. So today it's possible. It's a meaningful short story or meaningful song actually can be created with the help of ChatGPT itself, with the help of generative AI. So that's why. So you don't even need a very specialized software or very specialized AI. A simple ChatGPT kind of an AI can also do this for you. Disease diagnosis, of course, it can be done. We discussed about this. Text to speech conversion, this also is possible. And today we see that this is happening. That text to speech or speech to text, all these things are possible. And again, with the help of AI, they have been made much better. Fifth is wireless transmission of electrical energy. Now, wireless transmission of electrical energy is a little extreme, because when it comes to wireless transmission of electrical energy, even if it happens, all right, even if it happens, it doesn't happen because of artificial intelligence. It would happen because of the properties of electromagnetic radiations, the properties of, let's say, the radio waves or electrical waves. Correct. So that's why you cannot say that AI is going to do this. It's not AI that is going to do this. It would be the properties of the electromagnetic radiations that can do it, if at all. So that's why with the present state of development, the keyword being this present state of development. It's not a can be question. It's not asking what can artificial intelligence do. It is asking with the present state of development, what can it effectively do? What can it effectively do? All right, this is what the question is. So the answer today would be 1, 2, 3, and 4, which you don't have here. But this question was asked in 2019, and in 2019 there was no generative AI. Generative AI was not a part of it, so that's why 2 was wrong. And answer in 2019 was 1, 3, and 4. So this is how quickly things change. That in 2019 this answer was different. 2023 now the answer is different. So that's why their official key was not wrong here. Official key was correct, because there was no ChatGPT. ChatGPT just came last year in November, correct? So there was no generative AI being used. There was no ChatGPT being used. So meaningful short stories and songs was not possible with the help of AI in 2019. That's why this question, the answer, the official answer was 1, 3, and 4, which was the correct answer. And today, if we are asked the same question, the question's answer should be 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, moving on, what's happening in India? We see that today India also started taking AI very seriously, whether government or non-government entities. We see that everywhere AI's penetration has been very fast. So first and foremost, we see that it started with the defense forces. That we see that defense has started using AI for various different purposes of security. At the same time, we see that a lot of private companies also, for their own good, for their own requirements, they have started using AI. So that also we have seen. Then, according to a NITI Aayog report, According to a Niti Aayog report, we see that this is a data that was given by them, that AI will add $957 billion to India's GDP by the year 2035, boosting India's annual growth by 1.3%. Boosting India's growth by 1.3%, which is significant, correct? So that is basically what Niti Aayog has been saying according to its data. Then there was a report that was published last year, and according to that report, India was in the ninth position in terms of number of AI specialists. So already, that's why I said that already we see that in India we see a growth, whether in the private sector or in the public sector, we see that there has been a growth, and we have been trying to catch up with all the things that AI can actually do for us. Then one very significant thing, something that we discussed was missing with robotics, is how there has been an integration with our academics as well when it comes to AI. So for example, CBSE introduced AI as an elective subject in class 9, as an elective subject, as an additional subject, that if you want, you have an option that you can take that subject. Then after that, we saw that IIT Hyderabad became the first college in India to provide a full-fledged BTech program in AI. And then after that, we have seen that a lot of private colleges also, they also have started doing this. Today, you'll find that every good college, every popular college is providing you this. Okay, so it is providing you this. So that's why AI is something that is now available as a part of the curriculum for a lot of with a lot of institutes. So that is basically where we see that all these things can actually be very, very helpful. So that's why we see that in India there is a growth, and when it comes to the potential areas of growth, we see that it can become a part of digital innovation. It should become a part of digital innovation in a broader perspective, so that government can start using it. Because right now what we see is that although governments also have started using it, but not in a significant way, not in a way in which we see the private companies doing it. Correct? So probably the governments also have to venture into it very quickly. So targeted delivery of services, schemes, and subsidies can be done with the help of this. Smart border surveillance and monitoring is possible. Weather forecasting is possible. A better crime data analysis and ensuring the road safety also is possible here. Disaster management is also where it can really help. So overall, we see that there are multiple different things: counterinsurgency and patrolling operations, automating the government processes. Overall, if I tell you this, that you can just simply think of an answer. I'm giving you an assignment. How can AI help in governance? Just think of the various aspects of governance, the various aspects of what you might know, and it's a very easy answer to write. Just think of the various aspects of governance and how exactly AI can help in governance. Just write a simple answer in 150 words and please submit. Please submit it. AI in governance. How can artificial intelligence help in governance? There are multiple aspects to it. There are multiple things. You also know what aspects of e-governance, aspects of RTI, accountability, transparency, everything that you know of, the various social sector schemes, etc. How the delivery of schemes can happen. All those aspects, right? So there are so many things that you can think of, and all these things can actually be asked with respect to artificial intelligence. Then lastly, the challenges, the problems that we have. Right now, we see that largely it is still being driven by the private sector. It's not that a lot of significant work has been done by the government. We see that it's still being done by the private sector. The education system still not updated. That even if you, for example, take the case of CBSE allowing this as an elective subject in class 9, even then, if you frankly go and ask the schools, how many schools do you think that you'll find that these are the schools which are providing this additional elective subject? So that is where it lacks. That as a part of plan now it is available, but whether it has been implemented on the ground is the question. That how many, for example, let's say maybe in tier 1 cities, in the metros, we still might have a significant number of schools which might provide this subject as an elective subject, but I'm not sure about the same when it comes to tier 2 and tier 3 cities. That there, how many such schools are present? And if the schools want to provide it as an elective subject, they need to find the faculty. They need to find a teacher who would be able to teach a class 9 student about artificial intelligence, because it's a very rapidly growing sector. It's a pretty new sector, correct? It's a very, very new sector. 5 years back, we were just talking about the films and the TV shows which used to talk about AI, and this is the future that we might go. Today, it's a reality. Within 5 years, we have seen that it has completely changed around. So that's why we don't know what direction it can take in the future. But right now, we see that the number of skilled resources in this aspect is pretty less, and it's growing day by day. And even if you have people, they are mostly in the tech sector. They are in the tech companies. They are not available as a part of the education system. So that is also one of the problems. Then one of the prominent debates that will always happen is poverty versus technology. Every time a new technology comes in, especially for a developing nation like India, a growing nation like India, these kind of questions will always be raised. And forget about questions being raised in the terms of AI. You might have just seen that happen in terms of Chandrayaan 3 as well. That as soon as we launched Chandrayaan 3, some of the Western media, they started discussing this. That why is India launching Chandrayaan 3? India should be talking about, or it should be thinking about feeding its population rather than going to the moon. So these kind of topics were raised by the Western media, and it will always be raised by the Western media only. It will never be raised by an Indian media channel or even it's an Asian media channel, because we know that the thought process of the West has been very different. They always have been seeing the East, or let's say the Asian countries like India, or let's say the other South Asian countries like Bangladesh, Pakistan, or even China in that sense, in a very different lens. So that is also the reason why they talk about this. But we have to understand this. A very simple underlying point I'm going to tell you, that we cannot use the term versus when it comes to poverty and technology. It's never a competition between poverty and technology. Technology is an enabler. Technology will help societies come out of poverty. Technologies will help people grow, and it's not going to go against the people. So for example, the investment that India has done over the last 30-40 years in space technology today helps us in so many ways. It helps in agriculture, it helps in weather monitoring, it helps in disaster management, it helps in mineral resource monitoring, it helps in traffic management, it helps in communication, it helps in navigation. So just imagine the number of areas in which space technology has been able to help, because India took a decision, and government after government, whatever the government came, they gave sizable amount of budget to space technology. Because of that, we are at a position today that it can help Indian society. So that is how technology has to be seen. Same goes for biotechnology. The advancements in biotechnologies are helping us in the health sector. It is helping us in agriculture. It is helping us in even cleaning the environment. There are so many ways in which it is able to help. It is saving lives today. It has brought down the cost of the medicines today. It has brought down the time it took for the vaccine to be prepared because of biotechnology and the advancements that we saw there. So the same vaccine, for example, that which used to take 8 to 10 years or maybe 20 years or more at times, took 6 to 9 months of time to prepare. Advancements in biotechnology. If we did not invest in biotechnology, this would have never happened. So that's why you have to understand that it is never a versus. It's never a versus. Technology is an enabler, right? Technology is an enabler, and technology is something that will help societies come out of poverty. So that's why this is very, very important for us to understand. Because many times what happens is that when we see things like this from the lens of the Western media, they would report a lot of these negative things about countries like India always, but we have to have a much more objective view about these kind of things. then one of the major problems, one of the major worries when it comes to something like AI is the decrease in demand for human labor. That we see that there are so many things that can be automated, there are so many things that people can start doing on their own, and they will not need anyone to do that. And already we see that there is a shrinking economy in a lot of things where technology directly is being used. So you might have seen that there are so many, especially in the biggest of the tech companies, there have been so many people who lost their jobs over the last couple of years just because of this. And we see that it's something that you can't even help, because when you start looking for getting things done faster with better productivity, things like AI will come into these kind of sectors, and unfortunately people are going to lose more jobs. So that's why now this is where the governments have to come in. This is where the governments all across the world have to come in, because if you want that the jobs are not being lost, we need something that we often talk about, that is skill development. That how to ensure that people, even if let's say people are going to lose job in a certain company or maybe in a certain sector, how can we provide them opportunities somewhere else, or can we train them to at least exist here, to start using that AI to help that AI grow faster instead of getting replaced with these kind of systems. So that's why skill development at this juncture becomes very, very crucial, whether it is about self, whether people on their own, or whether the government's being an enabler here again to ensure that the jobs are not being lost, and if the jobs are about to be lost somewhere, start taking steps accordingly so that people who are employed in those sectors, they do not lose. And then we talk about existential risks and the possibility of a moral degradation in the society. So existential risks meaning that where we think that entire existence of humanity, the entire existence of humanity might be threatened because of AI. What we basically discussed in Superintelligence, and what a lot of films also have shown us. So that kind of possibility may be in the future, maybe not today, but you don't know what happens in the next 50 years or next 100 years. So we have to take a lot of steps from that perspective as well. There have to be rules, regulations that are taking care of all those aspects. And then moral degradation of the society. Now, when we say moral degradation of the society, it's more in terms of how we have started giving more importance to the machines rather than our fellow humans. That how we interact with machines more probably today than we interact with somebody from our friends and families. That even if you're talking to a family, even if you're talking to a friend, you perhaps are doing it through WhatsApp. You're attending this class through an online platform. You don't know me, I don't know you. Perhaps you don't respect me, maybe I don't respect you. These kind of aspects of problems are already being seen. That, for example, let's say a lot of work is happening from home today, and it's not that the people are actually interacting. So when you don't interact with people, you don't see them socially, you don't have the same respect for them as you would if you were standing close to them or talking to them person on person. So that's why these kind of aspects already we see that today. Let's say you see a person falling and your mobile phone falling from the roof. I don't know whether you try to save the mobile phone or the person first. So that kind of a problem is what we see today. That we are moving towards a direction where we are dependent on the machines a lot, and probably we love our machines more than we love a fellow human. So that kind of a problem is where we are starting to head. I'm not saying that it has started to already become a problem, but soon it can if corrective measures are not taken. So that's why we have to actually understand all these aspects of the technology as well. So it's not all good, it's not all bad. It's a balance that we have to find in these kind of areas. So now all these kind of aspects, they all can actually become a direct question for you in the mains examination as well. They can ask you about the positives and the negatives of all these things. So you have to be prepared for with all these points as well. So this is it for this chapter, a small chapter. But if you have any questions, can you let me know? Anything that you want to ask? Mother, I'll check your email. I might have missed it. After the class, I'll check what you've mailed me. Which country is first position in AI? I mean, two of the countries which have been doing significant things in AI, one has been US, one has been China. These two have been the countries which have spent a lot of money, invested a lot, and they have been growing a lot in this sector. Application of nanotechnology in food and agriculture. Nanotechnology in food and agriculture is rather more about the use of radiations, how you can use those radiations so that you can increase the shelf life of the food, or you can destroy the pests, etc., which is there in the food or even in the soil, etc. So all that can be done. Plus, we have nano fertilizers today, which act better, which have a better efficiency as compared to the normal fertilizers. How eccentricity and inclination determine the orbit of satellite? I mean, they don't determine based on the application, based on what we need. We determine these factors. So those factors are calculated based on our requirement. Using biometric to identify is AI or not? Not in most of the cases. Most of the cases, biometric is just a simple software based on the reference that you have given. It will simply match that reference and give the data. So it's not really AI in most of the cases. Wouldn't AI affect human creativity? Yes, of course it can. And in a lot of fields, we see that because we know that the thinking aspect of what we want to do can be probably done by the AI. And many times we see that a lot of people actually have been using that. That is where we have to be very, very cautious in also using AI, because a lot of originality goes away. We'll discuss more about this in the chapter of IPR as well. In IPR, we'll discuss about how exactly the creative field is getting affected negatively by AI, and where the aspects of intellectual property rights also comes into this. So just hold on. We'll discuss about this in Monday's class. All right. What is the best AI tool to get the maths question solved more accurately? There is one called as Wolfram. I mean, if you know about this, there is one called as Wolfram. This probably is one of the best to use. Difference between AI and generative AI. There is no difference. AI, I mean, generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence where this generative AI can generate content. That's why generative, because it can generate content on itself based on the prompt or based on the input that has been provided to it. Does it really lead to decrease in demand for labor? Yes, of course it would. So, for example, let's say in the industries where let's say a lot of people are in an assembly line, they're doing their jobs. You can very easily have an AI-based robot work there, and one robot will be able to replace maybe 10 people very easily. And that too, they can keep working 24 hours a day instead of there being time shifts for the people who are working. So you know that very easily. You'll be able to decrease the number of people that you need there. Similarly, in the software development, etc., what we see is that you already have all these areas being negatively impacted by the action of artificial intelligence. So that's why still we can't really see this happening yet. But yes, of course, in the future, this will be a problem. This will be a much bigger problem than it is right now. Using fingerprint is AI or not? No, I wouldn't say that. AI can lead to end of creativity, logical and analytical thinking in long term. It may affect brain efficiency gradually in evolution. Completely agree with you. And this is not only about AI, with everything that we have which makes our job easier. Anything that makes our job easier probably is also leading to we not having to think about it. So that's why we see that all these can become a bigger challenge in the coming years, especially with AI. That, for example, let's say somebody just asked about a math tool that can help in solving math problems. So then you don't have to think. You simply will copy and paste the question to these kind of softwares. They'll solve the question for you. You never had to think about it. So now what happens is that there are two things that can happen here. Either it can kill your creativity altogether. It kills the creativity. It kills the analytical thinking and logical thinking, as you mentioned. Or there's a second thing that can happen, that the trivial things will be done for you by AI, and you will spend more time on thinking of higher order skills. So you will be involved more with things which are more complex, which AI cannot do for you, and the trivial things, easier things can be done for you by AI. Now it's up to us how we determine this and how exactly we use these kind of systems. But yes, it is a word of caution that this will these kind of things can happen in the future. We already see that, for example, let's say with the mobile phones, how the things have changed. That even in our capacity to be patient about something which we see that has been decreasing with the advent of all these things. In the social media also, for example, something like Twitter was created so that people could objectively express their opinion and they can share their opinion and have a good conversation. Now it's we also know what it is. Everybody has chosen sides. Everybody will be just looking to bring down the other person in these kind of platforms. People were afraid about computers also when it was put to use, that it will hamper employment, but it generated more employment instead. Can it also be presumed for AI? It's a possibility. What you have mentioned, there's a very interesting graph for it. There's a very interesting graph about US, about the number of jobs versus year. So if we plot year versus number of jobs in the US, this was a US based data. This is what they saw, that the graph grows something like this. The graph grows and it goes like this. So this year, the dip that you see is the year 2000 or near 2000, where computers rapidly were introduced everywhere in the systems. So what happened is that initially it led to a decrease in jobs. So this is the number of jobs growing as the growing year. But now when you look at this, what happened is that initially there was a drop, but then the number of jobs just started to shoot up. The number of jobs actually increased with the advent of computers. So yes, is it possible that something similar can happen? Yes, of course it is possible that it can happen in terms of AI as well. That a lot of things that are undoable for us right now will start opening up aspects for even doing that in the coming future. But that's why there is a fine balance here, and we need to understand it. It needs to be analyzed well, and that's why systems and governments have to sit on something like this. Can deep sea exploration can be done with the help of AI? We can. Basically, it's about image processing, so that definitely can be done. Wrong info fed on AI tools will lead to wrong output. Wouldn't AI be vulnerable to it? It of course will be vulnerable to it. That is one of the biggest challenges that we have right now. That where exactly has it been trained? Because let's say whoever is training them, whether that person knew how to train it, whether that person was equipped enough or had the expertise to train it better. So if that was not the case, and let's say just an instruction was passed on to somebody that you just go and just train the system. So if that person does not know how to train that system, you do not know whether it will be trained properly or not. So yes, of course, that's a possibility. Is it really new content that ChatGPT produces, or is it a right mix of existing information to match the question? It's the latter. It's basically about the right mix of existing information. Yet, what it basically reproduces all that information. It would have taken the information from maybe 2 or 3 websites, would have collated it, and maybe has given it to you in its own words. So that's why it's not that it is creating new content. It's not creating new content. It is generating content based on whatever information it already has. Did they use AI in Chandrayaan safe landing? Not landing, but overall operations, AI has been significantly used. AI becomes silent killer for children's skills. Absolutely correct. So many of it are. Photo map also is a good app, correct, for the math problem. Will I conduct class tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow is a class. Tomorrow, same time, 6 a.m. in the morning. We'll be having the class tomorrow as well. The rebel in London regarding AI taking jobs of humans in movies and content writing, will it be relevant in Indian context? It should become relevant in Indian context as well. In Hollywood, we already have seen that it has become a big thing. It will soon happen here as well. AI is also said to have certain biases. A recent concluded study showed that how AI-based face recognition was not able to work efficiently among the Black and the Asian population. It's correct, and it's not only about face recognition. Overall, it all depends on who has created the system, who has fed the information to the system, how objective were they while feeding the information to the system. All these things matter a lot, and many times we do see that there are a lot of biases, whether in terms of races, whether in terms of religion, whether in terms of gender. In each and every case, there can be a lot of biases, and yes, that's a big challenge that we have right now with regards to AI. That it all depends on who is doing it, because anyone who's programming, what their thought process is, how they think, is completely what is going to determine these kind of systems. in the field of education sector, how is AI used? As you explained in some IT colleges. So basically, the colleges have started providing courses. The BTech degrees, the engineering degrees, are being provided in AI-based systems, and AI in computer science, AI and neural network, and so on. These kind of courses are now being provided. What is the use of technology if it disrupts human faculties? The enhancement of technology led to sedentary lifestyle, which is indeed affecting the health badly nowadays. How can we justify this? See, we have to understand one basic thing about what you have mentioned here. Whatever problems we see, technology has not caused that problem. The human who created that technology is causing that problem. We know what's wrong, we know what's right, but we still do something that just is easy for us instead of taking that difficult decision or taking that difficult step. So it's not technology. Blaming it on technology is not right. Technology is available. How you can use it is up to you. How we use it as a society is up to us. So the same biotechnology, for example, can be used to create medicines. The same biotechnology can also be used to create a virus. Now, whether you want to create a virus out of it, whether you want to create a medicine out of it, is up to humanity. So that is basically where the problem lies. It's the problem lies with the humans and not with the technology. In the case of technology, can it be completely asked questions on technology? Can we link concept with current affairs? Yes, of course we have to. We always have to. There was news that ChatGPT uses billions of liters of water. How exactly is this? So basically, this is about energy consumption and how exactly energy consumption happens a lot in training of the systems day in and day out. So that is where the context I think comes from. ChatGPT also uses Baiju's website. It certainly would for information wherever. Say it's very basic for them. Whatever websites are doing well, where the websites are being clicked a lot by people, they would take those websites. That's simple. All right. I think I've taken almost all the questions that I had here. Yeah. So next, a small chapter of health and diseases. Look, when it comes to this chapter of health and diseases, this is a chapter which is more relevant from current affairs perspective. Whenever questions have come from here, they always have come in the context of current affairs. Hardly, I think there is one or two questions in the last 10, 15 years where you can say that the question was not actually based on current affairs. But even then, the question was very trivial whenever it was asked. So there are certain topics which are important, which will remain important because of a lot of discussion has been happening around it. Apart from that, it's a chapter that you completely should rely on the current affairs of this chapter rather than anything else. So what we are going to discuss are some of the basics related to this chapter, and then after that, you'll have to keep adding current affairs over the next 9, 10 months or so, and so on. So now, first and foremost, when it comes to disease, what do we mean by disease? We say that any malfunctioning process that interferes with the normal functioning of the body can be called as a disease. Correct? Now, in this case, there are multiple ways in which we define or we can classify disease. If you look at this, disease first can be classified into congenital and acquired diseases. So congenital diseases are the ones which might be present in a child since the time of its birth, whereas acquired disease is a disease that will be acquired over a course of time. So there it can either be communicable or it can be non-communicable in nature. So communicable, which can be communicated, basically which can spread from one person to another, that will be called as communicable. And the ones that cannot be spread from a diseased person to a healthy person, that can be called as non-communicable disease. Now in this particular case, when it comes to non-communicable diseases, there are again various different types of diseases. For example, we have degenerative disease. Degenerative diseases are the ones which normally happen with time. That after a certain age, the vital organs of the body will start to malfunction, or various organs of the body will not function with that efficiency that they used to. So overall, all these things will happen, and ultimately it will lead to certain kinds of diseases. So that's why these are called as degenerative diseases. Then after that, we have deficiency diseases. So deficiency diseases, the ones that happen because of the deficiency of a certain nutrient from our body. In most of the cases, it might be the deficiency of a vitamin or a mineral. So these will be called as deficiency diseases. Then after that, there are allergies. So allergies are where you are sensitive against a certain, let's say something, food or maybe dust, etc. So some kind of hypersensitivity, right? Some kind of hypersensitivity of the body to certain foreign substances, and this could be anything. It could be a food item, it could be dust and pollens, it could be a piece of cloth, it could be anything. Then there is cancer. Now, in case of cancer, cancer is nothing but an uncontrolled growth of cells. Uncontrolled growth. Generally speaking, we discussed about this, that the cells will keep on growing, they keep on developing, and they keep on dying. This is a continuous process that happens inside the body. But sometimes what may happen is that this cell keeps on growing and it does not die. So this is where it can lead to cancer. This is where it can start becoming cancer, where we see that there are two types of cancers that can develop. One which is called as benign. One is called as benign and one is called as malignant. Right? One is called as benign, one is called as malignant. Now, benign cancer or benign tumor is the one which is not a very big, as big a concern as malignant is, because benign remains localized. So it remains localized. So that's why it does not spread from one place to another. It does not spread from one body part to another or one cell to another. So that's why it can be controlled. It can be cured. But when it comes to malignant, this is where the problem lies, because this is the one that spreads. This starts to spreads to different body parts. Different body parts. So that's why malignant becomes a problem, because controlling the malignant tumor at a later stage almost becomes impossible. So there will be chemotherapy, etc., that the patient might have to go through, but still the chances of completely curing it is very, very less. Although there have been instances where we have been able to cure even malignant tumor, but overall what we see is that if it is benign, it's still treatable, but if it is malignant, then we see that there lies a problem. So that is how we basically describe diseases. First, we have the communicable ones. So communicable, as you know, that these are the ones which will spread from one person to another. That can spread to even one organism to another. So that can be called as communicable. Where we see that there are various different modes of communication. So for example, it could be because of direct contact, that you directly come in contact with the person who has that disease and you also get that disease. So in case of smallpox, chickenpox, etc., that is what the case has been. Then after that, there is droplet infection. So droplet infection is when, let's say, somebody coughs or sneezes, etc. So by coughing, sneezing, spitting, etc., what may happen is that the pathogen, the virus or the bacteria might also be released along with it, and then it is suspended in the air, and somebody else who is there in the same surrounding, who is there in the same vicinity, might also catch that disease. So prime example being COVID-19, where we see that how exactly with COVID-19 something like this can happen. So that's why you would be asked to wear the mask, etc., so that neither you are spreading it or not you are getting affected by somebody else spreading it. Then coming in contact with contaminated soil, the soil that would have the diseases in them. So often we see that in small children these kind of problems are seen. Then it can also happen because of animal bite. All right. So a simple example here is rabies. That rabies infection happens when a rabid animal bites a human. So that animal already affected with rabies now has bitten a human. So what happens is that the virus gets transmitted from that animal to the human, and hence now this person can also get rabies. Then there are indirect modes of transmission. So indirect modes of transmission is where first and foremost, it can happen by vectors. So what is a vector? We discussed in biotechnology also. Vector is a carrier, correct? So these are carriers of diseases. For example, house flies, mosquitoes, cockroaches, etc. These are carriers of diseases. So because they are carriers, it means that they are carrying. How is it different from rabies? Because in rabies, the animal who has bitten the human, the animal is already infected with rabies. Whereas in these kind of cases, these are just carriers. They are not infected. For example, a malaria carrying mosquito, it only carries malaria. Right? It only carries malaria. It does not. It is not infected with malaria. Whereas a dog which has bitten a human, the dog might already be infected with rabies. That's why that is being called as direct contact, direct transmission, and this is called as indirect transmission. Then it can be airborne, that the pathogens may be suspended in the air, the cyst or the pathogen may be suspended in the air, and that somebody breathes and they also get affected. Then it can be object borne or fomite borne, where they may reside on contaminated articles such as clothes or utensils, toys, door handles, taps, etc. So from there on, it can spread. Again, in case of COVID-19, we have seen that we were also asked to wear gloves, for example, right? So that when you wear the gloves, when you are wearing the mask for any kind of air transmission, and gloves so that you do not touch anything that might have that particular virus in it. So that's why all these precautions are supposed to be taken, and so many precautions. I mean, it's just been a year and a year and a half where we used to take so many precautions. We had to take so many precautions just for our survival, nothing else. Just for the survival, we had to do it. We lost so many lives. We lost so many people to this disease. I'm sure that every person here has somebody in the family perhaps who you lost. So unfortunate scenes, but this is basically what happened, and we had to take all the precautions to make sure that we can survive this. Then we have waterborne diseases. So in case of waterborne diseases, these are the ones which might where the pathogens might reside in water. The biggest of the cases have been in cholera or diarrhea, hepatitis, jaundice, etc., where we see that water can be a mode of transmission. So these are all indirect modes of transmission when it comes to communicable disease. Then after this, we have the non-communicable diseases. Now, in case of non-communicable diseases, these are the ones which where they do not spread from a diseased person to a healthy person, but there are other factors that can lead to these diseases, and that's why many of these diseases today they also have been named as lifestyle diseases. They have been named as lifestyle diseases. So they have been named as lifestyle diseases because they are happening because of our incorrect lifestyle, because of the way we are handling our lives. That has become a reason why these kind of diseases have been spreading. So many of these we see that they actually are related to our incorrect lifestyle, whether it is about your eating habits, whether it is about your sleeping habits, whether it is about the way we maintain our lives, whether it is about the stress that's there in our lives. So there are many of these reasons that can actually lead to a lot of non-communicable diseases. Now, in case of non-communicable diseases, what we have seen is that the number of cases of non-communicable diseases has been rising. Some of these diseases that were only seen in people who were very old, above 50, 60, 70 years of age. Now we see that some of those diseases also have been observed in people who are young, people who are in their 30s and 40s, which was never expected of them. So a prime example is the first one that you have in the list, that is diabetes. Diabetes is a disease that used to happen only in people who are 50, 60, 70 years old and so on. But now we see that there are diabetes cases that we see in 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and so on, because of nothing but incorrect lifestyle, incorrect eating habits, etc. So that's why we have to be very particular about all these things, and we need to understand this, because the number of cases are not only rising, but rather the number of deaths have been rising with regard to these diseases, which was never the case in the past. Then there are others which are degenerative. For example, osteoporosis is a degenerative disease where there is a time when we'll see that in certain people that the bones will start to become brittle, and even a minor accident might lead to multiple fractures in them. So that is called as osteoporosis, where the calcium and vitamin D is not well utilized by the bones. So that's why extra vitamin D or extra calcium, etc., would be advised to the patients. So in these cases, we see that they all become non-communicable diseases. Now, one very, very important aspect, and probably one of the areas where I believe questions should come, is mental health. Because when it comes to mental health, we see that first and foremost, the number of cases of mental health issues have been rising in the world. First, secondly, we have a better understanding today. We do see that it's not we do not have the kind of ignorance that we used to have towards these kind of mental health issues. So what do we mean by mental health? It is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to her or his community. This is a definition that has been given by WHO for what we should define as mental health. Now, so that's why it is not saying that there should be absence of stress from your life. It's about the coping of that stress. That people who are in a good mental state, they'll be able to cope with the stress that they have. But if not, then that is where the problem lies. Now, what we see today is that there is an increasing number of cases of mental health issues, and these issues are attributed to many of these reasons. So, for example, the changing lifestyle pattern. This is what we discussed, whether it is about your sleeping pattern, whether it is your eating habit, or whatever it is. We see that it is, for a lot of people, it's not great. It's not great by any stretch of imagination. So that is where the problems lie. That, for example, having a good sleep of 7 to 8 hours is required. Having a good balanced diet is required. Having those foods at the required time is required. So there are all these things that we need to do, and that's why we'll have to take all those steps for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And we see that with a healthy lifestyle, a lot of these issues automatically can be taken care of. A good, let's say, physical activity also being added to the list of things that we should do. So there are all these things that actually help in solving some of these mental health issues also. Then social stigma and discrimination. This can also lead to social, these kind of issues can lead to mental health issues as well. We see that happening with a lot of people too. Then the career, the way people look at their career, that also has been seen as a big challenge in today's world, because that has been leading to a lot of stress in life, a lot of problems, a lot of incorrect lifestyles, etc. as well. The way we are working, the way many of us are working, that also actually adds to the problem. And of course, one of the biggest culprits of the day, smartphones. The way we look at our smartphones, the way we give the importance to our smartphones, we are not taking the help of smartphones, so we are not running that smartphone. The smartphone has started running us today. So that has become a problem. And the way we use smartphones, not only smartphones, but also, let's say, taking a broader area of the internet, or making maintaining your social profiles. That, for example, today when you click a picture, I don't know whether you click the picture for the beauty of it, or whether so that you can post it on Instagram. So that's the difference that has come here today. That we are, even if we are clicking the picture, we are not clicking the picture because we like the aesthetics of that picture, but rather because we think that it is a clickable picture, or rather a postable picture on a social media platform. And after posting that picture, if you get a good number of likes, you like it. If, let's say, for some reason not a lot of people have liked your picture, then it starts playing with your mental state. So something as trivial as people not liking your picture should not play with your mental state. But I see how the things work, and unfortunately, that is what the society has been reduced to: the number of likes and the number of comments that you get. So that's why we see that all these things, especially people who love to maintain that profile, love to maintain that social profile, it becomes a big challenge for them. So that's why we see that today all these are aspects of a problem that smartphones actually have also led to. Then there are demographic and environmental determinants as well here, that they can also lead to these kind of problems. And we do see that certain kinds of environments or certain kind of climates are also related to a lot more cases of mental health issues like depression as compared to others. For example, something like sunlight is said to be good for your mental health. That somebody who's not getting exposed to a lot of sunlight can actually go in a negative direction of depression. It is clinically proven that something like this can happen. So that's why for those climatic zones which are often cloudy and they do not get a lot of sunlight, etc., we see that the number of these cases in those areas are actually higher. So there are all these external factors also, and it's not only about the internal factors. Then, talking about the various different types of mental disorders, there are a lot of them. We are discussing only the ones which are the most common in the world, where the most common one perhaps is depression. Now, in case of depression, what we see is that first and foremost, there is a huge misunderstanding of what depression means and what depression is. And because of that, and also the kind of stigma that is associated with it, a lot of people never come out and say it out loud that they have this problem. Because first and foremost, you have to understand that a mental disorder is also a disorder. Just like, for example, a physical manifestation of disease, where, let's say, if you have a fever, you know paracetamol. You know that if you have a fever, you'll take paracetamol, you'll ask somebody for a paracetamol, or at least you'll consult a doctor. At least you'll consult a doctor and you will get those medicines so that you can recover. But in case of mental health disorders, what we see is that we don't talk to anyone, we don't tell anyone, we don't consult anyone who is an expert of this field, who can at least help you in one way or the other and bring you out of this state. So that doesn't happen. And there is a huge misunderstanding of what depression is. There's a huge misunderstanding of what depression is, that it's not about just a person being sad, right? It's just not about just a person being sad and being in a low mental state today. It's something that remains with a person for perhaps months, years, and I know people who have been suffering more than a decade. So that's why, I mean, it's not something that can be said to be just a state of being sad, right? So if somebody just says that, okay, you just need to cheer up, it's not that easy that a person will be able to just cheer up and forget about depression. It's just like saying somebody that you forget about this fever and the fever will go away. That doesn't happen, right? So something similar, you have to think of it here as well. That's not only about somebody being sad today, and that is where we see that there is a lot of misconception as well among the people. That, for example, you could be sad because of something. You could be sad because of one problem or the other. So let's say India is playing a cricket match, and India loses today. So then you will be obviously sad because your team lost. But then tomorrow will win the World Cup and you'll be happy again. So then after that, those sadness will go. So that's just a state of being sad because of one incident or the other. That's not depression. Somebody who says that I'm depressed today because India lost is completely wrong in saying that. So that's not depression. That's sadness because of something unfavorable happening to you. So that is where we have to understand the difference, because somebody who's actually suffering with depression, the problem will be a lot more persistent and a lot more severe, because here we'll see that there will be a persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities causing significant impairment in daily life. That the basic of the activity, the basics of their daily routine, they'll be not able to do because of this state of depression, and that perhaps may stay with them for months, if not years, when something like this happens. So that is where the difference lies between somebody just being sad because of an unfavorable outcome versus somebody who's in a state of depression. So we need a better understanding of these kind of areas as well, not only the patients but also for the people who live near these patients, who live, let's say, somebody in your family, someone in your friend circle, somebody in your relatives. If they are suffering, we also need to understand that problem, and it's not only about them understanding this problem, because these are issues where a support helps a lot. A support system being there within the families or in the friends, it really helps, and that's why for the understanding of people around that person suffering is also very important. Then there is something else which is called as anxiety. Depression along with anxiety, these are the two most common mental health disorders that we see right now in the world. So in case of anxiety, what we see is that this is also, there will be feelings of worry, anxiety or fear that are strong enough to interfere with one's daily activities. Now, feeling of worry or fear or this anxiety can also be driven by a certain factor or driven by a certain incident, but many times what we see in these cases also is that it's not always that you have this as a very big problem. So for example, let's say when you go to write your prelims examination, of course you'll be afraid, of course you will have that anxiety, but that anxiety for majority of the aspirants will be for the first 2 to 5 minutes, and then you settle down into that paper and you start writing the answers or you start comprehending that paper. But for somebody who suffers from anxiety, for them the scenario is very different, because it's not only the fact that they'll feel that for 5 minutes, they might feel it so strongly that they might not be able to perform. Under certain conditions we see that they very easily just develop a fever, if not anything else. They may feel nauseated because of these kind of issues. So that's why for a person who's suffering from anxiety, it's a very different scenario as compared to a lot of us who would just feel anxiety in a certain situation, and that is something that we'll be able to cope with. But in extreme cases of people who are suffering, there are anti-anxiety pills that they have to take. They'll be asked by doctors to take those medicines so that they can take care of that anxiety. So that's why we have to understand the meaning of what anxiety in daily life means versus what anxiety disorder means, where an anxiety disorder can be a lot more severe as compared to a normal anxiety that most of us anyway have. Then there's something called as bipolar disorder, where we see that there will be episodes of mood swings from being very depressive state to being in a very high state. So these kind of changes can happen in these kind of cases. Now when it comes to bipolar disorder, this has been one of those mental health issues that also has been seen to be genetic in nature. It can be, right? It can be genetic in nature as well. That if one of the parents have bipolar disorder, there are chances that one of their children may also develop bipolar disorder at a later stage in their life. Then there is something called as dementia. Now, in case of dementia, we say that it is a group of thinking and social symptoms that interferes with daily functioning. So, in the cases of dementia, largely we see that dementia will be observed in people who are very old, people who are in their 70s and 80s and so on. But what happens here is that a basic thinking ability, basic remembering ability goes away, and the person will not be able to even remember very basics of their lives. They'll forget about the relations, for example. So these kind of things can happen in case of dementia. Then there is something called as schizophrenia. Now, in case of schizophrenia, here also we see that the function's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly is getting affected. And that's why many times what may happen is that their brain makes a completely different scenario for them, which is something completely false, which is completely false, but they don't know that. They do not know, and sometimes they the lines between what is real and what is imaginary becomes very blurred for them. So that's why it becomes very, very dangerous scenario for these kind of patients. So that's why schizophrenia becomes dangerous. And then there is something called as OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, where we talk about excessive thoughts or obsessions that lead to repetitive behaviors or compulsions. That let's say, I mean, most of us, we like some kind of pattern in our lives, and if there is something that goes beyond that pattern, we may not like that. But in case of patients who are suffering from OCD, even a small departure could mean a lot of issues for them. So that's why if they need their life to be in a certain way, their daily activities in a certain way, they do not like any kind of departure from there, and that can actually become a big challenge for them to. So, for example, one of the most common OCDs is an OCD related to washing of hands. So, not only I'm not talking about the post-COVID era, but I'm talking about even before that. That there are people who have that OCD of germs. So they would always feel that if they're touching any surface or they're going outside somewhere, they always feel that they have germs on their hands and they keep washing their hand all the time. So that has been seen to be one of the most common OCDs in the world. So these kind of scenarios, whether it is about your room, whether it is about your space, whether it is about how you do a certain thing in a certain way, there are all these things that can lead to an OCD. So there are minor cases that's there with every one of us. So, for example, for me, it's the fonts that I'm using in my lecture. So there are only two fonts that I use, and I ensure that these are the only two fonts that I use in every PPT that I'm giving you lectures in. And if I see any other font by mistake, then it bothers me a lot that there's a third font that is being used. And not only for me, I've implemented it for the other faculties as well, because I did not like even their PPTs, and at times when I saw those PPTs, I changed their fonts as well wherever I could. So these are, but this will not be called as an OCD because I can live with it. It's still fine. But there are cases where people will not be able to function properly if there is a departure from what they are doing. So that's why these kind of issues are always there, and these can be a very big challenge for people who are suffering. Now, what we see today is that there is a telemental health program also that has been started in India, and this is a news that was in PIB a couple of months back, where we basically are talking about how exactly more than 2 lakh calls have been received over the Televanus helpline that has been operational since last year. So that's why we see that this is something that has been taken as an initiative. We see that there are other mental health programs as well that has been launched by the government of India, understanding the problems that people are facing today, understanding the number of issues that have been rising. Because the requirement of something like, let's say, a therapy being required for a lot of people to get over a mental health disorder. So those therapies usually have been very costly, and that also has led to not a lot of people having that access. A lot of people not having that access because it's very costly for them. So that is where we see that this kind of initiative would also help that easily it will be available for people across the country, and hence we see that this has been very important. So one of the key aspects of the steps that we have been taking, or the government of India has taken. Right. Then the last topic of this chapter is drug resistance. So when it comes to drug resistance is basically a resistance against drugs that certain pathogens might have. That even if you are taking that drug, even if you are taking a medicine, the pathogen, the virus or the bacteria does not get affected by it. So the medicine is completely not functional against that pathogen. So that kind of a case is called as drug resistance. Now, when it comes to drug resistance, what we see is that there is this way in which drug resistance might manifest. So, for example, what might happen is that a person might have a couple of drug-resistant pathogens in the gut, and then when you take a medicine, the normal ones, they are getting destroyed. The normal ones get destroyed, but the ones which are drug-resistant, they would not. And now they would start to grow. They would start to multiply, and hence their numbers would increase. And not only that, they would also lead to changes in the properties of even the ones which are not drug-resistant. So overall, we see that the numbers will keep on rising like this. The numbers will keep on rising. So there are multiple ways in which we see that something like this actually can spread. So what are the ways? Just try to understand the ways in which it spreads. So one could be from a person who already has the drug-resistant pathogens in their body. Let's say they go to a hospital, they go to a healthcare facility. In a hospital, you already have people whose immune system is weak, who do not have a good immune system. They are already fighting some other disease. So because of that, immune system is not ready for something else. And then in that case, very easily, if let's say the transmission of this drug-resistant pathogen happens, it can very easily spread to others in the hospital as well. And not only in the hospital, for the person who lives with other family members and friends, etc., in the society, without knowing, these kind of transmissions will keep on happening. So that's why the drug-resistant bacteria will keep on growing in numbers in the given population. That can become one pathway. So that way, one pathway could be directly from the affected person. Now, the problem here is that you do not know. All right. The problem here is that you do not know, and it's not that it's a disease. It's not yet manifesting itself as a disease. It just remains there in your body. So it will keep on spreading, and nobody knows because nobody is seeing any symptom as such. So that is where the problem lies. Then, secondly, it could be through animals. It could be through animals, and especially it could be because of overdose of antibiotics. It could be because of overdose of antibiotics. That many times what happens is that the animals that we are using in our farms or the poultry, we see that they are fed with a lot of antibiotics, a lot more than what's required. That if one tablet is required, you give them 2 tablets just to ensure that the infection does not happen. So that is not how it works. You have to give them the medicines and antibiotics in the required amount. But the overdose, actually what it leads to is a lot more bacteria actually developing, because that overdose leads to them also understanding what's working against them, and this kind of a scenario. So then, while consuming, let's say, if uncooked meat or not properly cooked meat is being consumed by people, that can lead to this, and even through animal feces, it can mix with the soil and the water bodies and spread from there. So that also becomes one of the ways in which this can spread. Another way in which it can spread is our own ignorance. Another way in which it can spread is our own ignorance. We all are doctors, right? If I say fever, you'll say Dolo 650. So everybody knows Crocin, everybody knows Dolo 650 and all that, and we start becoming our own doctors. We do not consult a doctor, we do not go to a hospital. We simply understand, or if not anything, we will just go to Google and we presume that Google knows everything. And you will see certain symptoms, you will type those symptoms on Google, and Google will tell you that it is cancer, and you will start believing that it is cancer. So, but we have to understand that this kind of self-medication is very, very bad for us, because ultimately you do not know, you haven't done the test, you are not a qualified doctor. Google is not a qualified doctor, so it can only give you some suggestions based on what certain websites have given it. So this is very wrong, because then what happens is that many times we take wrong medication. Like for example, antibiotic. We just know that okay, we can take antibiotic, but when do you take antibiotic? Against what do you take antibiotics? You take antibiotics against a bacteria. You take an antiviral against a virus. So do you already know whether it was a viral disease or a bacterial disease? You do not. Correct. So you do not know that. You took a wrong medication, and that will lead to more growth and development of these kind of diseases in the body. So ultimately, that's why we have to understand that a wrong, you can say, an incorrect healthcare seeking behavior. This also is a big problem. This also is a big problem. So that's why we have to understand that this can lead to a problem. One more problem that has been actually observed, and this was a research that was done, a study that was done in Hyderabad, where we found that there are these units where medicines are being made, antibiotics are being made. The drainage system of these industrial units, they had residues of antibiotics, and these antibiotics were then going to the drains where you have a lot of bacteria, etc., which reside there. So they were getting exposed to these antibiotics, and they were also getting that resistance. They were also developing that drug resistance because they had to survive in that environment. So that's why it also has become one of the ways. So the drainage of antibiotic manufacturing units. So this also can actually lead to this. So incorrect healthcare saving behavior, where either it is a wrong medication or an incomplete medication. Many times this also happens. That let's say you go to a doctor, doctor told you that okay, fine, you take 2 medicines daily, one in the morning, one at night for 5 days. So in total of 10 tablets you have to take so that you can cure the disease. By the second day, you see that the disease is gone. You don't see the symptoms anymore. So you think that okay, fine, I don't need to take the medicine anymore because I already see that the symptoms have gone away. So then what happens is that the symptoms might have gone away, the pathogen may not have. The pathogen may not have been flushed out of your system yet. So that also can become a challenge, because then it has just become inactive. It has not died yet. It has just become inactive, and now it knows what worked against it. So now there are higher chances that it will start developing a drug resistance against your body. So that's why there are so many things that can actually happen in this particular scenario. Now, to fight this, what we see is that Government of India has launched a red line campaign. These are called as medicines with a red line, as you see here. That the ones which have higher chances of antibiotic resistance, they now come with a red line. There will be a red vertical line like this, so that you know that these are the medicines that should not be taken without prescription. They should not be taken without a doctor's prescription. At least you should make sure that something like this can be taken care of. So there are a lot of steps. For example, a better behavior from us is required. From the patient's perspective, also the patient should also be educated in these kind of cases, and also for the prescribers and the dispensers, people who are selling these, because many times this also happens that over-the-counter medicines, you can just go to the pharmacy and you can ask for medicines, and they also casually give out the medicines many times. So that also is wrong, because they also think that they know everything, because they would have given these medicines to so many people. So they have a basic idea, but you should not rely on that idea. It's similar to you going to a bookshop and asking for the set of books required for preparing for UPSC. So the bookshop owner will always be able to give you that book list, because there are so many people who have bought from them. But that's not the right way of studying and strategizing your preparation. Same goes here as well. So that's why all these things are required, especially given the fact that today we have online medicines also available. So that also becomes a challenge, because then you have to rely on the prescriptions, etc. If they don't really see that prescription well and they are simply giving out the medicines, that also can lead to the problem. And in this case, what we see is that WHO also has done a revision where they have divided all the antibiotics into 3 categories: access, watch, and reserve. Access is the one where commonly used antibiotics have been kept, where they are easy to use and they do not cause any problem. Then the watch one is the slightly more potent one, where it can actually lead to some complications. So without prescription, it should not be taken. And then lastly, you have the reserve category, where they should be used only as a last resort. When nothing else works, when no other medicine is working, then only these should be taken. These are also called as last mile drugs. These are called as last mile drugs, because they have to be taken only when nothing else is working for you. So that's why this categorization has been done, so that for the people who are selling the medicines also, they should also be aware that this is how the behavior should be. Right. So this is it for this chapter. So let's take a break here. Any question if you have with regards to whatever we discussed, please post your questions here. I'll take your questions, and then after that we shall. We'll take a break now, and then we shall. I'll take your questions when I'm back. So it's 7:57. So let's be back by 8 a.m. 8:10 a.m. Right. Welcome back, everyone. First, let me see your questions first, and then we shall move forward. Dolo 650 directly affects on kidney because 650 denotes mg of Dolo, and as per WHO advisory, any medicine mg bar is higher than 600. We should take once a day. That's correct in most of the cases. When it comes to any medication, the amount of medication that you are taking always matters a lot. That, for example, in case of paracetamol formulations as well, you'll see, for example, the ones which are for headaches, etc., Saridon, etc., they'll have a much lower concentration of paracetamol as compared to something like Dolo 650 or Trucin 650 and so on. So yes, 650 mg is a lot and should be avoided as much as possible. But in certain cases where it is not avoidable, it has to be taken. So, and that's why prescription is very, very important. That somebody, just because you had fever, you cannot just keep taking paracetamol, because it has a lot of negative impact on kidney for somebody who just keeps on taking wherever required. So only in certain cases of, let's say, very high fever in something like a dengue, for example, there the doctors would ask you to take even Dolo 650 maybe 3 times a day, because the fever is very high, and to calm it down, to bring it down, you need to take that. So yes, it's, of course, it matters what dosage is being taken, and that's why self-medication as much as possible should be avoided. What about the veterinary antibiotics given to cattle and fish shrimps, and we are consuming it as meat? Do they accumulate in, or is there any effect? They can, and that is what the problem is. That's why we say that the food, I mean, even if it is meat, it should be cooked very well before consumption, because otherwise it can be dangerous at times, and that's why it can lead to bioaccumulation in this kind of cases. So biomagnification in these cases. So that's why yes, they have to be taken with precaution as much as possible. Is cancer hereditary? It has been seen that in 5 to 10% of the cases, cancer also can be genetic in nature. Not always, right? Not always, not in every case, but in it has been estimated to that up to 10% of the cases that can be the problem. How is the government ready to tackle the humanitarian crisis in the future if it happens due to robotics and AI? Frankly, I wouldn't say that the governments across the world today are ready. They have started thinking in that direction. They have started seeing what can go wrong. But still, I wouldn't say that we are in a space where a lot of these efforts have been made by governments across the world. So, long story short, if you ask me whether we are ready, right now we are not. There could be misinformation on the internet as well. What are its ramifications if the AI is trained on data without differentiating between right information and misinformation? That is where the problem lies. That a lot of information that has been taken, we do not know what the source of that information was. And if the source of information was wrong, then misinformation very easily can spread. For example, a lot of research that I keep on doing for, let's say, any current affairs or any lecture that I have to take, I see that there is a lot of wrong information that is present there. So it happens all the time. I mean, it happens all the time, and that's why it depends on who has trained the data. So let me give you a simple example. Let's say Byju's has to train an AI system on various different subjects. I might be a very good candidate to train that system on science and technology, or maybe in environment and ecology. I probably am not the best candidate to do that for geography or to do that for polity. I would probably prefer a Mukesh sir for geography or a Salman sir or Anubhav sir for polity, correct? Because they are the experts of that subject. I am not. But let's say if I have been given the job to do that for every subject, I'll do with whatever standard sources I have. Probably I'll train it with something like a Lakshmikant or something of that sort. So what then happens is that I wouldn't have done the best of the jobs, because for my subject I know each and everything well, and I know what kind of training that particular system needs. But I cannot take the same decision with as much as wisdom for those subjects as I would have done for, let's say, something like a science and technology. So that matters a lot. That while the training of the system is happening, who is doing that training, and with what kind of objectivity are they doing the training? Some parents have genetic disorders like fall of hair, short height, long height, and some have sometimes skin also. But same in case of parents are different and their kids are totally different. Why? So see, what happens is that there is a mix of genes in the children. There will be a mix of genes. So some of those genes will be inherited. Some of those genes will not be inherited. The ones that are inherited, those kind of things will be shown in the kids as well. The kinds of genes that have not been inherited, then in that case, they might not show that property. Non-communicable diseases are not communicable but can be transferred genetically from parents to kids. Yes, it is possible. It is possible that it might so happen. In animals, meat have in bacterioviruses are present in the meat. Is there any beneficial for humans or not? Wouldn't say so, because whatever helpful microorganisms we need, we already have it in our body. So it's nothing that we get from there. Examples of hereditary diseases. There are a lot. For example, something as simple as diabetes can also become genetic in nature. So that's why we say that the chances in children of people of parents who already were diabetic are higher, and they have to take an extra precaution, because then they have those genes that can lead to diabetes. How fat can hamper blood circulation and heart-based disorders? Fat, basically, what happens with fat is that fat will keep on getting deposited inside your body, in the nerves, inside your muscles, etc. And that's why they would start to block the passage of nutrients, passage of blood, and all. And that is why it starts to cause a problem. Is it suggestive to other ways, Ayurveda, Unani, etc.? Nagesha, can you give me the context in which you are asking this question? Can drug resistance spread through plants if the plant is irrigated with water containing such pathogens? See, what happens basically here is that the bacteria or the viruses, in most of the cases, they are specific to a given species. So a plant virus generally does not affect anyone in the animal kingdom, and vice versa is also true. So that's why they would not be able to survive in those environments. So that's why they would not be transmitted from there on. Right. So let's move on. So next chapter for us is a small chapter of vaccines. Now, in case of when it comes to vaccines as a chapter, I mean, again, it's not something that has been mentioned in your syllabus, but in the context of the present times, it becomes an important chapter. There are a couple of questions that have been asked in the past, and I still believe that there are more to come in the coming years. So first and foremost, what do we mean by vaccines? And I have a question for you here first. That if I ask you, what is the difference between a vaccine and a medicine? Can you tell me the difference between a vaccine and a medicine? Yeah, Deepika, you're correct. Akula also correct. Prajwal correct. Chaitanya correct. Abhishek correct. Tabdis correct. All right. So many of you have been given the correct answer. So the basic difference: medicines cure, vaccines prevent. right? So we would take the vaccine to prevent a disease, whereas we'll take a medicine to cure a disease. That's the basic difference between the two, correct? So now in this particular scenario of medicines versus vaccines, when it comes to vaccine, we are trying to prevent a disease. Now the question is, when do we want to prevent a disease? And would we not want to prevent all the diseases? Why do we have medicines? Can we not have can we not have vaccines for every common disease instead of having medicines for them? So you have to understand two things here before we delve into the concept of vaccines. First thing is, when do you want to prevent? We want to prevent when it can be fatal, when it cannot be cured. So if there is a possibility that I can prevent it before it happens, I should do that. Or if it can be life-threatening, that if it happens, there are chances that it could take the life of that patient. Then in that case, we would want to prevent. Otherwise, if we can cure it, if we know that there are ways in which we can take care of that disease, we can cure the disease, we would probably prefer that. Also, if you start taking vaccine for everything, you will also confuse your body. It's not easy for your immune system to keep a note of everything. That instead of what happens here is that instead of studying 5 subjects, they have to study 50 subjects and remember 50 subjects. So for them also, it's not very easy to just remain there, and it can actually be a big challenge for them. So that's why there are these two reasons. That one, you try to prevent a disease which can be potentially fatal, or something which is incurable for you. Secondly, if you take a lot of vaccines, if you keep taking vaccine for each and every disease, then your immune system will not be able to handle everything perfectly. So that's why we see that there are limited number of diseases against which we take a vaccine. Very recent example for us has been COVID-19. In case of COVID, we know that although COVID also people come out of COVID, it can be cured, but people have lost lives and it is potentially life threatening. And that's why COVID-19 vaccines. That's why the vaccine was important, so that we can prevent the disease before it happens. Similarly, let's say something like rabies. Rabies is 100% fatal. So if somebody is suffering from rabies, they will die. There is no cure that we have for rabies right now. So that's why you have to prevent it. That's why you have to take a vaccine against rabies so that you can prevent rabies. So that's why we see that always will take vaccine in such a scenario. Now, how do we define it? We define it as a suspension of a weakened, killed, or fragmented microorganisms or toxins, or of antibodies or lymphocytes that is administered primarily to prevent a disease. Okay. So now when it comes to the definition, what we are saying is that either we'll use a microorganism, the pathogen maybe, or something which is very close to that pathogen, or maybe a toxin that is harmful for, let's say, which the immune system recognizes as not being useful, or so something like this will be done, right? So what we'll do is that in all these cases, vaccines will be used. Now, in general, understand the basic concept behind the vaccine. That how does a vaccine work? What do we do to make a vaccine? So many times we call the vaccine also as a pathogen imposter. So why are we saying that it is a pathogen imposter? Let's try to understand that. So in this particular scenario, this is how the vaccine works. Just understand the entire process of how the vaccine works. First and foremost, when the vaccine is delivered. So when the vaccine is delivered, what we deliver is something called as an antigen. These will be called as antigens. So antigens will be delivered in our body. Now, most of the cases of vaccines, what we see is that the vaccine will be made of a pathogen or something that is very similar in its structure and function to the pathogen. So it will contain a virus, or maybe it contains a bacteria in it. So the question is that if we are giving the same thing that actually causes the diseases, how does it prevent the disease? So first and foremost, this antigen that we are delivering to the body, the pathogen, the virus or the bacteria that we are delivering to the body, it has been weakened. Either it has been made very weak or it has been killed already before delivering to the body. Right? So we do that first. So these are called as antigens. What is an antigen? Antigen is anything against which our immune system responds, or anything that our immune system would attack. That will be called as an antigen. So now this antigen is delivered to our body through the vaccine. Now next thing what happens is that we have antigen presenting cells. Right? We have antigen presenting cells. So these antigen presenting cells, these are like, you can say, night guards who are just on a patrol. They would just keep roaming around in the body, in the bloodstream, just to look for something unusual, just to look for something foreign. And as soon as they come across something that they do not recognize, they would quickly make sure that they catch hold of it. So what happens is that these antigens will simply stick to the body of these antigen presenting cells. All right? They'll stick to the body of antigen presenting cells, and then when they stick to the body of antigen presenting cells, this is where we see that now they would take these antigens to the required authorities. So it's like a thief has been caught at night by the guard, and now they are going to hand it over to the police. So the police will do whatever they want to do with that thief. So this is what has happened until now. That the antigen entered the body, antigen was countered by the antigen presenting cells. So that's the antigen presenting cells, because these are the ones which will present the antigens to, or give the antigens to the required cells. So this is where T helper cells come into the picture. These T helper cells will they will receive these antigens from the antigen presenting cells, and they will start calling upon the B cells and the killer T cells. So B cells basically they will take the antigen and they will do all the research with that antigen, trying to understand that antigen, trying to understand what is this antigen and how to attack this antigen. So in a manner, what we say is that these B cells are like locksmiths. They're like locksmiths, that you have given them a lock where you have lost its key, and you are asking them to make that key. So this B cell will now make that key for this antigen, and this key that they make is called as antibody. These are called as antibodies. So antibodies basically are the proteins that act against the antigens. They will act against the antigens. So that's why they're like the keys. The antibodies are they are like the keys that will be able to fit into the lock, which is this antigen. All right. So that is what is happening until now. Now, the next thing that we see is that these B cells will understand what kind of antigen it is. Based on that, they will produce thousands to lakhs of antibodies. All right. Thousands to lakhs of antibodies will be produced next, and then what we'll see is that this is where the things will change. That these antibodies simply will go and lock themselves. They simply go and lock themselves onto the body of the vaccine antigen. So this is what the B cells do. That they will see the antigen, they'll analyze the structure of antigen, and they will make antibodies according to what they saw. Done. Next is the role of the killer T cells. So what happens in these kind of killer T cells is, killer T cells basically are like assassins. They're like assassins, that they have a mark. What is the mark? This is the mark. Whatever has been marked by the antibodies, whatever cell has been completely captured by the antibodies, they will simply go and destroy that. They only know this, that whatever has been marked by the antibodies, just go there and just destroy it. So this is what will happen. So now what has happened is that these killer T cells, they have completely destroyed the vaccine antigen. They'll simply go and destroy the vaccine antigen. So then the question is that if the vaccine has been destroyed, then how does it help? How does it help if it has been destroyed? The answer is this: the memory cells. The entire process, whatever was happening, there was a video recording of it. Right? There's a video recording that was being made of it, and this video recording will be played later. So something similar is happening here. That a memory of all these aspects of memory of the entire procedure, that memory is kept with the immune system. So they create memory B cells, memory helper T cells, and memory killer T cells, and these know what was done to this vaccine antigen. So next time when the actual pathogen enters, because actual pathogen in its structure will be very similar to the vaccine antigen. The vaccine has been chosen in a manner, that it is very similar to the actual structure of the pathogen. So for example, in case of COVID-19 also, you might have come across this news that for COVID-19 also, in a lot of vaccines we are using other viruses, other coronaviruses which are not harmful for us, but those are coronaviruses. So that's why they are very similar in structure to the actual SARS-CoV-2 virus, that is the COVID-19 virus. So now what happens is, because there are memory cells, so they know what this looks like and what needs to be done whenever you have a similar structure in the body. So as soon as the antigen enters the body, the same antigen presenting cells again will come in the way. Now what happens here is that the memory helper T cells will come, because they recognize what it is, they know this, and that's why memory helper cells will come. They will call upon the memory B cells and they will call upon the memory killer T cells, and now the similar antibodies will be made, and they will go and capture the pathogen. They go and capture the pathogen, and they would now the killer T cells will simply go and destroy that pathogen. Now what happens here is that this happens very quickly. The first time when the vaccine entered the body, it would have taken some time for the immune system to figure out how to act against it. This time when the pathogen enters, the body already knows. The body already has an inbuilt immune against it. So that's why the immune system will very quickly act this time. Because this is otherwise what the problem is. That for example in COVID-19, the problem is that by the time the body understands how to act against this virus, it might be late. It might be late for a lot of people, and that is what we saw. That a lot of people lost their lives because of this, because the immune system could not fight this virus, could not figure out how to fight this virus. Only with the people who, let's say, had very strong immune systems, or let's say people where fortunately for them the viral load of that virus would have been less. Only in those cases we saw that people could survive. Otherwise, even if let's say there have been a lot of unfortunate deaths here, but even if not, we see that it became very severe for a lot of people also. Correct. So that's why when vaccine is taken, the time that immune system otherwise would have taken when directly exposed to this pathogen, now that wouldn't happen, because the vaccine has led to a kind of a training, or has helped in developing a mechanism so that you are ready for the future. The immune system is ready for the future, and it does not get affected by the pathogen whenever the pathogen enters the body. Right. So this is basically what is done in this scenario. So first step is that vaccines deliver antigens. Then I'm writing this as APC. So then APCs carry the antigens to T helper cells. T helper cells initiate the immune response. With B and T cells. B cells analyze the antigen and produce thousands to lakhs of antibodies. Next, killer T cells destroy the vaccine antigen surrounded by the antibodies. So this is basically what will be done, right? And then lastly, what we see is that memory cells are created with information on the procedure to destroy similar antigens. So this is basically how the things work. So just remember the story, so that just in case you have to reproduce this in the paper. And then the next step is when the actual pathogen enters the body, the same procedure will be repeated by the immune system much faster with the help of the memory cells. All right. So this is the entire procedure. This is the entire procedure of how vaccines work. Now, in case of vaccines, what we see is that to make this procedure work, there are various different types of vaccines that we use. We have whole pathogen vaccines, we have subunit vaccines, and we have nucleic acid vaccines. So now, whole pathogen vaccines are the vaccines where you use the entire pathogen, right? Where you use the entire pathogen, and that's why it is called as whole pathogen vaccine. Now, this can be done in two ways. Either you have inactivated vaccines or you have live attenuated vaccines. All right, we have inactivated vaccines or live attenuated vaccines. Inactivated vaccines are where the pathogen that you are using, the pathogen already has been killed. Right, the pathogen already has been killed, and then they are administered inside the body. Now, the immune system does not know what is living and what is not living. It just sees that there is something foreign. I do not like that structure. I want to destroy that structure, and they will just go and destroy that structure. So that's why inactivated vaccines will be used where you already have destroyed the pathogen being used, and then after that it is being delivered in the body. And then after that we have the live attenuated vaccines where the pathogen has not been killed, but rather it has been weakened. It has become so weak that it's not going to cause any harm in the body. It has been made very dormant, and hence it is not going to do anything wrong in the body. So that's why the body is not going to be affected. Even though the pathogen is living, even though the microorganism is living, yet it's not going to cause any trouble to the body. All right. So that's why inactivated and live attenuated vaccines, these are whole pathogen vaccines. Most of the vaccines that we have used until now, we have seen that most of them, they have been whole pathogen vaccines. Then we have the subunit vaccines. So subunit vaccines are called as subunit because you are only using a part, where you are only using a part of the vaccine. So that's why it is called as subunit vaccine. So only the part that acts as antigen is used. So that's why it is called as a subunit vaccine. So subunit vaccine, for the first time we see that against COVID-19 there were different vaccines that were made, and some of them were subunit vaccines. Otherwise, as I told you, in large number of cases before this, they have been cases where whole pathogen vaccines have been used. Then we have nucleic acid vaccines, where we use some kind of genetic material. Some kind of genetic material is used as antigen. So genetic material as antigen. Right? So this is basically what we see in case of nucleic acid vaccines. So here we see that we have mRNA vaccines, DNA plasmid vaccines, recombinant vector vaccines, and so on. So all these mechanisms have been used. Again, for the first time, we see that visibly it is being used against against COVID-19. So whole pathogens, we will write where entire pathogen is used. Entire pathogen, living or dead, is used. Right. So this is basically how we are looking at the various different types of vaccines. Now, in these cases, there are some vaccines which have been very common, which have been used in various different countries. We'll discuss about that. First, I have a question for you. I've not discussed this, but I still want you to answer this question. You can answer this question from your previous knowledge. Read the question. I'm launching the poll also for you. Please mark your answers. I'm just launching the poll. Wonderful. 77% of you have marked C, which is the correct answer. 13% A, 9% B, and 2% D. So, question says, with reference to recent developments regarding recombinant vector vaccines, consider the following statements. First is genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines, and second is bacteria and viruses are used as vectors. So, recombinant vector vaccine. Where did we come across this term, recombinant? Where did we come across this term, recombinant? Biotechnology, right? So in biotechnology, while discussing the transgenic crops, the GM crops, we had discussed this. So recombinant was where we were combining, if you remember, combining two genes, right? We were combining genes here, right? Where you took the gene of interest and then you combine it with a carrier or a vector. That is where we came across this term vector as well. So what is the vector? The carrier of the gene. Right. So look at the first statement. Genetic engineering is applied in the development of these vaccines. Of course, because we are combining two genes artificially. So that's why genetic engineering is being used. Vector. So bacteria, viruses are used as vectors. If you remember, we had discussed this as well, that most of the cases we use virus, but we can use bacteria as well. Right. This is what we had discussed in recombinant DNA technology. So both the statements are correct. So correct answer, that's why will be both 1 and 2. So that's why without knowing about the vaccine, without knowing what this vaccine actually is, you can answer this question. So looking at the various different types of vaccines, first is inactivated vaccine. So what we discussed is that this is where we will use the killed version of the pathogen, which causes the disease. So against a lot of diseases in the past as well, we see that inactivated vaccines have been used. So against COVID-19 vaccine, a vaccine that we were using in India, there is a vaccine that we used in India which was inactivated vaccine. Do you know which one was inactivated vaccine? Any idea? Yes, Covaxin, correct. So Covaxin that we used in India, Covaxin basically is an example of an inactivated vaccine. Then there is live attenuated vaccine, where we have a weakened form of the germ or a very dormant form of the germ. Again, we see that there are a lot of cases in the past against which live attenuated vaccine has been used. So in case of the COVID vaccines, Covishield is an example. So Covishield, that was very commonly used in India. Covishield is a live attenuated vaccine. Similarly, we have mRNA vaccines, which also have been very common in the world, used against COVID-19. So now mRNA means messenger RNA. So messenger RNA is a kind of nucleic acid that we have in our body that contains the information or contains the instruction to make various different types of proteins. All right, it has the instruction naturally present in all our cells. It carries the instructions for making proteins from our genes. So that's why mRNA. Now, what we are doing in this mRNA vaccine is that this mRNA is being delivered to the body, and when it enters the body, inside the body it starts making proteins. It starts making antigens inside the body. So instead of what happens in normal cases, like for example in whole pathogen vaccines, that we deliver the antigens. Right here, we don't deliver the antigens, but rather we deliver the mRNA, and the mRNA will basically make the antigens inside the body. So there are two vaccines which have been common, not really used in India, but across the world it has been used. One by Pfizer and one by Moderna. There is already a controversy also between them, and we'll discuss about this controversy when we go to the chapter of intellectual property rights, most probably on Monday. So this is basically what mRNA vaccine is about. Now, lastly, we have the recombinant vector vaccine, or the kind that we use was the viral vector vaccine. So where we know that there is a virus that is being used as a vector, and hence a modified where there are two different genes being carried, or two different genes being carried from two different pathogens and being combined together. So that is basically what we see here. So against COVID-19 for the first time it has been used, and the Russian vaccine Sputnik V. You might have heard of this. Sputnik V vaccine is a viral vector vaccine. Right? This is the viral vector vaccine. So overall, we see that all these vaccines have been used. Plus, there has been this DNA vaccine, and this DNA vaccine is something that has been produced in India. It's the world's first DNA plasmid vaccine that has been produced in India. And one of the very, very important factor about this DNA vaccine, that first of all, yes, great that it is the first made in India DNA vaccine. Nobody in the world has made a DNA vaccine before India, so that's a great news for us. But at the same time, it's also very, very important because it tackles a problem which is called as vaccine hesitancy. vaccine hesitancy. So it tries to tackle the problem of vaccine hesitancy. So vaccine hesitancy is when people are afraid of taking the vaccine for some reason. So for example, you don't like needles. So if you don't like needles, which is the most prominent vaccine hesitancy in the world, so you don't like needles, so that's why you're trying to avoid the vaccine because you don't like to feel that needle going in your arms. So this problem gets solved because there is something which is called as PharmaJet, which is being used here instead of using the regular syringes. So it's a needle-free application of vaccine. So you might have heard of the nasal vaccine, for example, right? Nasal vaccine. So these are the vaccines basically where we see that because needles are not being used, injection is not being used. So a lot of people who were afraid of taking the vaccine because of the needle factor, they can get this vaccine. They can at least get this vaccine administered. So that's why DNA vaccine. And good thing for India that India has been the first one to make this vaccine. Now, for the vaccine, apart from the basic parts that the vaccine has, there are other things also that are there in the vaccine. So, for example, we know that there is this antigen. Of course, it has the antigen, but apart from the antigen, there are other parts also that are there in the mix of vaccine, so that vaccine can have the kind of effectiveness that it needs to do. So, for example, we have the preservatives. So preservatives will ensure that the vaccine does not become contaminated. So it will prevent the vaccine from becoming contaminated. So certain chemicals will be used. Then there are stabilizers. So stabilizers will prevent the chemical reactions from occurring in the vaccine. So that again, chemical reactions would also mean that it will lose its properties. So that's why it has to prevent it. Then there are surfactants. So surfactants ensure that all the components of the vaccines, everything that is there in the mix, it's all kept together. Right? It's all kept together in one single phase. Then there could be certain residuals. So residuals are the ones or the things that have neither a positive or a negative impact on the working of the vaccine. Yet they might be present because of some residues that were left over from the manufacturing process. So those are called as residuals. Then there is the diluent. Diluent basically is like the solvent for, let's say, something like water, where you will mix everything, right? So it acts like the solvent. It acts like the solvent in which you have all these components. So you might have seen that if you look at the vaccine bottle, you'll see that it is in the liquid state. So it's in the liquid state mainly because something like water would be used as the base for every other vaccine component. And then there is a very, very important part of a vaccine which is called as an adjuvant. Now, the role of the adjuvant is to stimulate an immune response from the immune system. Because what may also happen is that, let's say, the vaccine has been administered to you, and the vaccine, without having any effect, it is just flushed out of the system. It is excreted out of the system, and it did not have any effect on the body because the immune system did not come across it. Immune system could not find this vaccine, and the vaccine simply was excreted out of the system. You wouldn't want that. This is where adjuvants come into the picture. Adjuvants will start creating some local responses that as soon as they enter the body, they'll start making some ruckus. They'll start doing something so that they get noticed, so that the police would notice them. Right? So they would be like thieves who are stealing something in broad daylight because they want the police also to notice them. So this is basically what the role of adjuvant would be, that they would start creating local responses. They will make certain problems so that the immune system recognizes that there is a problem, and they would the cells would rush towards that area. So that adjuvants actually play a very, very important role. Now, last topic in this chapter is efficacy of a vaccine. Now, before we understand what is efficacy, we first need to understand what is the meaning of a clinical trial. Before the vaccine is released for the market, before it will be given to people like us, there will be a lot of steps that it needs to go through. So first step, for example, will be the lab-based studies. So for example, we'll try to understand the positives and the negatives of the vaccine. Is there any side effect? We'll test it on, let's say, a stem cell. We discussed about this, that on stem cell, we many a time we grow an organ or grow a tissue out of the stem cell, and we can test the vaccine on it. We can test a drug also on it. So that's why this will be the first step. If that's all good, we see there is no problem, then maybe on some animal subjects also it will be tested. Many times we see that on mice, on rabbits, etc. These kind of testings are done. If everything is great, if everything seems fine and it seems completely safe, then in that case, this vaccine would enter its phase 1. And it's in this phase 1, you will have a small group of people, let's say about 100, about 50. It can be 10, 20, 50, 70, 80, etc. So small group of people on whom the vaccine will be tested. If everything seems fine, if we see no problem whatsoever here, then we increase this to a population of, let's say, 500, maybe 300, maybe 700, approximately 500 people. If everything is good here, then we increase this population further to maybe 5,000 people, and then further to maybe 50,000 people. So in this manner, phase by phase, the testing will happen based on the result of the previous phase. Will sometimes, let's say, if there are certain changes required before it goes on to the next phase, those changes will be done, and it then goes to the next phase and so on. So after this phase 4, after it has been tested on phase 4, if everything seems fine, no side effect, no problem whatsoever, then it will be released for the market. So this is basically what happens in a clinical trial. Now at this stage of clinical trial, we calculate something called as the efficacy of a vaccine. So how exactly efficacy of vaccine is considered? Just understand this. This is a case study of Pfizer. This was released by Pfizer. So in Pfizer's case study, in COVID-19 vaccine that Pfizer made, there were 43,000 participants. Right, 43,000 participants, out of which 170 participants got COVID-19. Now, you might have come across these efficacy numbers, You might have come across these numbers that Pfizer has 95%, Moderna has 94%, our Covishield AstraZeneca is right here at 67%, Covaxin showing 78%, and so on. So you might have come across these numbers, and these numbers would also worry us, thinking that, okay, US is getting a vaccine which has an efficacy of 95%. We are getting a vaccine which has an efficacy of just 67% or 78%. So something is wrong here. It's not good enough for us, perhaps. So you might get these kind of feelings, right? You might get these kind of feelings. So that's why understanding of these numbers is very, very important. That in case of Pfizer, how the calculation was done, that 95% the efficacy that it has, how exactly does it have 95%? So out of 43,000 participants in the trials, there were 170 candidates who, even after getting vaccinated, they still got infected with COVID-19. 170 out of 43,000. Now let's see what happens in a clinical trial is that out of these 43,000 candidates, they will be distributed in two groups of equal numbers. So let's say 21,500. So this is one group and this is another group. Now what happens is, out of these two groups, one group will be actually given the vaccine and the second one will not be given the vaccine, but they don't know this. Perhaps instead of vaccine, they just have been delivered water, but you do not know that, right? You have not been told about it. So let's say first scenario, that there were 85 people who got infected even after getting vaccinated, and there were 85 from the placebo group. So this is placebo, where you have been tricked into thinking that you have been given a drug or a vaccine, but in reality you haven't been. Right? That's what it is called. This is called as placebo. So let's say there were 85 from the vaccinated group and 85 from the placebo group out of 170. Then you would say that the vaccine does not have any effect. That whether you take the vaccine or you don't take the vaccine, you're still getting affected. So that's why in this scenario we'll say that efficacy is 0. Then Scenario 2 could be that everyone who was vaccinated did not get infected, and everyone who was not vaccinated who received placebo, they got infected. So then in that scenario, it would mean that efficacy rate is 100%. Great. The actual numbers that we saw for Pfizer was this, that out of 170 people, there were 8 from the vaccinated group and there were 162 from the placebo group. And that's when now that you calculate this number would come out to be 95%. So 162 out of a total of 170 people is basically how we can get to the number. So overall, we see that this is basically how the things would be calculated, and we'll get the result based on these calculations. So now what happens is that when we are looking for a calculation of efficacy, this is how the calculation will be done. So it, I think, comes down to approximately 95.3%. So now what it means is that if you are vaccinated, this is the percentage of chance that you will be able to prevent that disease. So now it does not mean that out of every set of 100 people, 5 will get COVID-19. It talks about in an individual manner that an individual has 95% of chances that you will not get COVID-19 after getting vaccinated. Now, the problem is that these numbers can also be very misleading. We also have to understand from the perspective of what is the role of a vaccine. The ideal role of a vaccine is that it should prevent you from getting any kind of infection, right? It should prevent any kind of infection. If not, at least it should be asymptomatic. No symptoms should be there. It should be an asymptomatic case, or maybe moderate symptoms. This is what the vaccine is supposed to do, right? To help you prevent against severe symptoms, against hospitalizations, or against the certain or against the ultimate unfortunate scenario of somebody's death. So this is what vaccine is supposed to do. And from that perspective, if you look at the vaccines that we had, most of these vaccines you can say had a 100% efficacy. That even if let's say they were not able to be effective 100% of the times with no infection whatsoever, even if let's say something happened or somebody got infected even after getting vaccinated, in most of the cases, they could come out of it with very mild symptoms or maybe no symptoms at all. This is what we have seen in the later phases of COVID-19. That one, because of mutations also it got weakened, and secondly, because we were vaccinated, it got weakened. And even if let's say somebody got infected with COVID-19 even after getting vaccinated, the chances of you getting a very, very severe case was reduced to almost zero. It's not that it was completely zero. Yes, there have been a couple of cases where deaths have happened even after getting completely vaccinated. But what we see is that the numbers have been drastically low after getting vaccinated. So that is basically what we see with regards to the efficacy rates, and that is why we need to understand these efficacy rates a lot better, because many times we do not even know under what circumstances these efficacy rates were calculated, because companies would always want that they should be able to show as high efficacy rate as possible. So maybe they are not being completely ethical in doing these trials, and that's why those numbers may be bloated numbers and we do not know about that. So many times all these kind of problems can also happen, that they, for example, they might pick people who are very healthy. They do not pick people who are somewhat unhealthy, or maybe their immune system is not that great. They do not pick that people. So obviously the efficacy rates will be very high when you're picking people who are perfectly healthy, who do not have any, let's say, medical history whatsoever, etc. So that's why there are all these cases also which need to be understood well. So this is about this chapter. Any questions if you have, please let me know. What is a placebo? See, placebo is where you are being given something, where you have been told that you are being given a medicine, but in reality you haven't been given a medicine. Your brain has been tricked. Your brain has been tricked into thinking that you actually are getting the vaccine or getting the medicine. So for all you know, you might be taking a white colored sugar pill, but you have been told that this is Dolo 650. So that will be called as placebo. That you do not know. Your brain has been tricked into thinking that it is placebo. Sorry, into thinking that it is medicine. We say that, for example, a very important medical procedure entirely works on placebo. For example, your homeopathy. Homeopathy is said to be working on placebo effect. That many a times we see that the psychological effect of the placebo might also cure some of the milder diseases. Not in, of course, not in the severe cases, but in the milder cases. Why is the immune system of you compromised weak or take longer to act against antigen? It's just the basic way the immune system is. Not everybody would have the same strength. Not everybody would be. I mean, it's not only about the immune system. It goes for any system in the body. Naturally, over the course of time, you develop in a certain manner. It could also be because of the food habits, etc. that you have, the lifestyle that you have. That also can add to a lot of issues for many. And there could be other diseases that have weakened the immune system over a period of time. That also is a problem. Sometimes it's the genetics itself that can also lead to a very strong or a weaker immune system. So there are multiple such factors that act here. Can you do tomorrow class timing to 7? I'm not sure whether we can do it. I'll check, but I mean, chances are almost negligible that we'll be able to change the timings. How can we say vaccine is more effective? We are not saying effective. We are saying that the efficacy is high. So always remember that efficacy is not equivalent to effectiveness. We have seen, for example, a lower efficacy vaccine like Covishield or the AstraZeneca vaccine was better against the Delta variant, which was the most problematic variant, which caused the most number of fatalities in the world. Covishield or AstraZeneca worked better against it instead of the high as compared to the high efficacy rate vaccines like Pfizer, etc. If antibody produced by two or more different bodies or person, can it be similar or might be different if both persons affected by the same pathogen? So okay, it will be similar. I mean, the antibodies that will be produced will be very similar in nature because it depends on the antigen and not the individual. So depending on the antigen, we see that it can actually be very, very similar. Altinta vaccine. I'm not sure what exactly it is. If in placebo it is only sugar pill, how does the body? That's body heal. Basically, that's what I said. That it's more of a psychological effect many times that it has, and because of that psychological effect, also many times immune system starts working, and it is something which is very, very real. the memory cells created due to vaccine administration can also die. Then why are some vaccines one time and some need frequent doses? It depends on the kind of mechanism that is used, and many times we see that the vaccines which are faster in the vaccine, I mean, wherever we see that the pathogens are faster, we see that the vaccines also die faster, and that's why we'll use the second dose or the third dose. And in some cases where we see that where the pathogen is slow, the vaccine also is able to retain for a longer duration of time. That, for example, something like a rabies vaccine very easily can last for 5 to 7 years, if not 10, 12 years in the body, whereas a COVID-19 vaccine perhaps will not last for more than 2 years of time. So it depends on case to case, depends on what kind of pathogen it is and what kind of memory cells because of that has been created. Scenario 2 of efficacy not understood. Scenario 2 of efficacy was basically about that when everybody who took the vaccine did not get infected with COVID-19, and everybody who was given the placebo got infected. So that's why the efficacy in this case will be said to be 100%, because if you are getting the vaccine, you're not getting infected, and only the people who are not getting the vaccine are getting infected. So that is the second scenario. I'm confused that efficacy is calculated through unvaccinated persons or vaccinated ones. The vaccinated ones, the people who it is calculated on the basis of all the participants who were there. The death of vultures due to diclofenac, which spread almost to all the vultures to eat the animal like cow, is considered as antibiotic resistance. No, it's not antibiotic resistance. It was the toxicity of diclofenac because of this, because of which this happened. Clinical trials take a note of the short-term effects on health, but what about the impact which can appear in long term? That's a bigger problem. That's a problem that we always have to check for, and that also is the reason why you see that most of the cases when the vaccines are released in the market, they would have been released after 10 years of clinical trials, or maybe 15, 20 years of clinical trials. For example, the leprosy vaccine that has been that is made in India. India becomes the first country to make a leprosy vaccine. It took almost 35 years of trials. 35 years of trials. After that, it has been released. So in most of the cases, actually, that will be done. But what happens here is that for the people who are participants, that can be a very tricky situation for them sometimes. That if they are going with an ailment, they are going with an undisclosed condition, that can have a negative impact on them. If immune system is affected with foreign matter like AIDS virus, it will not be possible to get down the virus effect by using the immune system busters. Not really, because it completely, starts to destroy the immune system altogether. If affects it, it negatively starts to control it altogether and makes it impossible for the body to respond. Does the same vaccine work even if the virus has mutated, or does it require new vaccine? So whenever we make the vaccine, we ensure that all the present and the future mutations, or all the possible probable mutations are also taken care of, and accordingly vaccine has been made. So whenever we make the vaccine, we do not make it only for the present mutation, but we also do it for the future mutations. Why the vaccine for diseases like AIDS and rabies still not developed? For rabies, we have the vaccine. You take the rabies vaccine, but for AIDS, it hasn't been made possible. See, it's very, very difficult to predict how the virus would work. To attack the virus is not an easy job. In certain cases, we have been lucky that we have been able to do that, but in most of the cases, it's very, very difficult. And that's why in AIDS, although we have been trying for the last 20 odd years or 30 odd years, we still haven't succeeded with anything with regards to AIDS. Our body is so beautifully designed to mostly produce whatever it requires just by providing the right food. Absolutely correct. How T cells impact the pathogens? They would simply go and just destroy the pathogens. They would just look for the pathogens that have been marked by the B cells, and they simply go and destroy that. Usually, all the preclinical and clinical trials take a lot of years. How come COVID vaccines were released in such a less time period? There have been a couple of factors here. One factor has been biotechnology. Second factor has been artificial intelligence. Because of these two factors, these two advancements, which were you can say mostly absent in the previous such cases. For example, last time such a big problem, such a big stage problem happened was in 1920s at the time of Spanish flu, where you did not have developed mechanisms in the field of medicine that we have today. So these two were primary forces that could help us in making the vaccine much faster. Hormones injected to bovine animals to increase the milk production, which can also take a toll on hormone balance in the humans. What can be the long-term impact, and how can we tackle this? See, first and foremost, today that's why we see that there is an increasing awareness among the people as well in understanding what was done, what goes behind the scenes in the process. That when you have the organic, a lot of organic milk products, etc., also available today, it always is advisable that know your company, know the company from where you are buying it, know what they use, what procedure they use, what kind of animals they are using, what each and everything they have to disclose. And that's why we see that they all try to maintain that transparency today. At the same time, what can the effects be? Effects can be dangerous. They can lead to certain diseases. They can lead to permanent changes in the genes itself in some extreme cases. So that's why we need to be very aware of what's being used there. Otherwise, it can really have a problem in the future. Yes, immune system is the good defense mechanism for us. Absolutely correct. Tomorrow's class timing will be from 6 o'clock. We'll maintain the similar timings that we do every day. So there's no change in the timing. The same timings will follow for tomorrow as well. It's somehow we develop a vaccine for cancer where it stops the cell growth. It should be able to, but developing vaccine for cancer seems very far-fetched for today, because first and foremost, we don't even know what causes cancer. We know about the factors that can lead to cancer. So for example, let's say something like tobacco, use of tobacco, or maybe smoking. These are factors that can lead to cancer, but we cannot say that these are reasons for cancer. Maybe somebody who smokes a lot never gets cancer. It can happen. Maybe somebody who smokes little develops cancer. So that's why we see that there is a lot of unpredictability when it comes to cancer in a lot of cases. So that also is a big challenge with cancer. How scientists knew that there is something in the human body called antibody that have potential to protect body to any foreign particle or pathogen. So basically, it all starts. You'll see that in the 16th, 17th century, these kind of developments happen. Initially, we see that these kind of developments happen when we understood that the body also has a mechanism to fight, and with the advancements in medicine and a better understanding of our own body, we see that all these things started to develop. How cancer cells reproduce themselves? Not reproduce, but rather they keep on growing, and also those properties are imparted to other cells as well, and they also start to grow without stopping. All right, so I think I've taken most of the questions. It's already 9:20. I don't know whether we have the time to start with defense. All right, so let's because it's a new chapter. It's better if we start tomorrow. No worries. We'll start with defense tomorrow. So for tomorrow, we'll start with defense, and I'll tell you what all we'll do tomorrow. We'll start with defense. This will be the first topic for us, and then after that, we'll pick up a very very important topic, and that is IT and communication. A very very important topic, a very long chapter as well. Tomorrow it will start. I think it will flow to Monday as well. So tomorrow and Monday, IT and communication, and then the last chapter of IPR is something that we'll take on Monday. Okay, so this is basically what we are going to do in tomorrow's class. So we'll start with defense. A very small chapter, wouldn't take more than half an hour to 45 minutes, and then the whole day will be spent on IT and communication. This will continue on Monday, and then on Monday we'll take up IPR as the last chapter. Okay, so these are things that we're going to discuss. Leaderboard. Today I think there was only one question, so fine. There are enough number of you who are rank 1 today. My doubt is how to find out. It's great if you don't have any doubts. That also speaks that okay, fine, I could do a good job, that you did not have a lot of doubts. Right, so this is the leaderboard for you for today. So it was only one question today, so it's fine. Leaderboard does not have a lot of relevance in today's class. Right, so let's end our session here today. Tomorrow we'll start with defense, and we'll go to the chapter of IT and communication as the next chapter. Thank you very much.